We start the story with the main character's back against the wall, where he is forced to fight off the continent's strongest warriors. How did it come to this? He recalls his father's chilling words. He was always expected to live merely as a shadow of his brother. What a priceless sight, his opponent says as he bitterly mocks our boy. He has to admit, though, our boy, Cyan, lives up to his legendary status. Cyan rages, demanding to know who ordered his betrayal. It's unthinkable. Even after everything he's done, it's coming to this? Our boy has no other options but to defend himself. His aura starts swirling around the area. The opponent accuses Cyan of being a member of an infamous assassins organization, Mist, a great sin in the kingdom. Cyan vows to tear his enemies to absolute bits. But a chilling voice cuts through the chaos, commanding him to halt. Cyan stops dead in his tracks as a new figure steps into the light. Cyan looks on in utter shock, stammering out the name of his own brother, Ashiel. Ashiel steps forward with a cold smile, noting how deeply confused seems by his sudden arrival. Ashiel praises Cyan for carrying out his dark duties so exceptionally well, revealing that it was all done for his sake. Telling Cyan to finally lift the heavy burden from his shoulders, Ashiel watches as the battered warrior trembles, unable to comprehend what he did wrong. Ashiel scoffs at the word, declaring that the ominous fog brands Cyan as nothing more than a mindless murderer who can no longer be considered human. Spitting blood onto his collar. What kind of madness is his brothers talking about? Why is he being betrayed? The surrounding area erupts as Cyan remembers the brutal reality of the Empire's internal succession wars and the devastating raids of the Demon King's army. Why is he being betrayed like this? He recalls fighting on the front lines to help achieve everything his brother ever set out to accomplish, leaving Cyan coughing up blood as he realizes he is being completely abandoned. Cyan gasps for air, cursing the fact that he slaved like a dog for 20 long years only to be broken down and thrown away. Locking his eyes forward, Cyan resolves to unleash every single drop of his remaining strength if it means he can destroy his traitorous brother. An explosion of bright red energy rips through the dark monsters as the enemy commanders watch in absolute horror, realizing Cyan still possesses an impossible amount of mana. A cold, mocking message brands his final struggle as utterly silly as Cyan writhes amidst a swirling vortex of black and red energy. Ashiel taunts him, asking if he feels any shame, right before another powerful shockwave tears through the battlefield. Cyan drives his blade forward with savage desperation, screaming that he only needs a single, clean strike to end it all. With a heavy swing of his sword, Cyan aims directly for a critical weak point, hoping to pierce it before any regeneration can take place. Blinding lightning and magical energy clash violently as steel shatters against steel, sending Cyan crashing heavily to the ground. A blonde warrior barks out an order to a comrade while staring down at Cyan, cursing him as a poor, wretched bastard. A final, radiant sword strike cuts through the air, generating a brilliant burst of energy that seals Cyan's absolute defeat. Ashiel coldly claims he wanted to grant a painless death out of brotherly love, but states that Cyan has finally shown his true colors as a demon. Declaring he is glad he never trusted Cyan from the start, he leaves our defeated warrior broken on the ground. Staring at the dirt, Cyan lets out a bitter curse, realizing this is his end, and lamenting the foolish, wasted life he led. A heavy, echoing impact resounds through the darkness as Cyan's consciousness fades away completely. How did it come to this? Cyan suddenly gasps, his eyes snapping open in sheer confusion as he instinctively braces himself for another attack. A loud, frantic voice echoes through his ears, screaming for young Master Cyan to wake up immediately. A sharp voice demands to know how long he intends to sleep, telling him to get it together because he needs to get ready. Cyan stammers out the name Emily in utter disbelief, staring blankly at the maid who stands right in front of him. Emily asks if he is still dreaming, while Cyan realizes with a jolt that he is staring at the exact room he lived in during his childhood. Cyan bolts upright in his bed, sweat pouring down his face, as a sudden realization hits him like a physical blow. Emily chides him, asking if he is stalling for time simply because he wants to skip out on his mandatory training. Cyan blinks in complete bewilderment, repeating the word training as his mind struggles to process what is happening. Stepping out into the sprawling, old European-style streets, Cyan confirms that he has miraculously returned to the past within the duchy. He realizes this is no mere hallucination or a brief flash of memories passing before his eyes, right before death. Cyan notes the exact date as March 1st, year 985. Realizing he has regressed exactly 27 years back, 1 year before his academy admission. He remembers that the family holds an annual duel training session on this day, an event heavily attended by his stern father, Duke Vert. Cyan identifies his upcoming opponent as Kranz Vert, his half-brother who happens to be the exact same age. Because Kranz's mother is the Duke's official wife, Kranz always received far more attention and prestige, despite them both being the youngest. As a bastardized son, Cyan was brutally mocked in this exact fight in his past life, becoming an absolute laughingstock to the entire household. A stern warning echoes in his memories as Cyan recalls that this disastrous duel was the exact reason his father stopped paying any attention to him. Staring at the rapier in his hands, Cyan notes that, even though it is a light training weapon, it feels incredibly heavy to his current untrained body. Emily cheerfully tells him not to get hurt, while Cyan confirms through his senses that this reality is entirely real. Holding his blade low, Cyan looks up with wide, intense eyes, finally accepting that he is truly back in the past. Kranz steps onto the training field with an arrogant sneer, noting that Cyan surprisingly didn't run off and hide like a coward. Kranz calls out to begin and immediately lunges forward with a vicious sword strike, screaming at Cyan for looking away. Cyan effortlessly shifts his weight and fluidly dodges the blade, leaving Kranz completely stunned by his impossible reaction speed. Their boots pivot sharply on the stone floor as Kranz's face contorts into pure shock, unable to comprehend how his strike missed. Kranz aggressively swings again, furiously roaring that Cyan is merely dodging like a coward. A massive shockwave ripples through the courtyard as Cyan counters with a blindingly fast strike, forcing a painful grunt from his arrogant brother. With a loud crash, Kranz goes tumbling across the pavement, prompting a shocked, panicked cry from the onlookers. Cyan calmly stands over his fallen brother, noting that while placing a blade to his throat would end the duel, that simply isn't enough. He remembers how Kranz used to ruthlessly bully him for entertainment, a torment that originally continued all the way into their academy years. Cyan resolves to absolutely stomp Kranz into the dirt right here, ensuring his brother will never dare to cross him again. Standing firmly over the defeated boy, Cyan vows that he will now pave a brand new path entirely on his own terms. Kranz writhes on the ground in agony as the duel officially concludes with his absolute, humiliating defeat. The Duke immediately orders an audience, freeing up his tight schedule as Cyan walks through the grand halls, passing the glaring estate ladies. Cyan deduces that the Duchess was likely just whining to the Duke about her precious son's humiliating loss. The Duchess confronts him with absolute fury, screaming that he has the thick-skinned audacity to act proud after beating his own brother so brutally. Cyan coldly brushes her off, stating, "That is simply how duels work," which drives the Duchess to spit venomous insults about his birth and biological mother. She rages that bastards belong on the streets begging for food, declaring he should know his place and be grateful for even living under their roof. Cyan's eyes flash with a deadly, crimson light as he realizes this woman has crossed the absolute line, wondering if he should just kill her on the spot. Cyan reins in his lethal intent, deciding instead that he knows a much better way to make her suffer through agonizingly slow torment. Cyan reminds her that he will be attending the academy alongside Kranz, asking with a chilling smile if she wants her son to graduate with all his limbs intact. The Duchess gasps at the blatant threat as her attendant roars at Cyan, calling him a vulgar piece of shit for daring to speak to the Duchess that way. Cyan casually offers a hollow apology, stating that they shouldn't delay any longer before turning his back to leave the room. A stern knight stands guard as Cyan notes that his father's orders are absolute, granting him temporary protection from the family's wrath. Cyan reflects on how reliable it feels to have a powerful guard knight who won't submit even to the commands of the Duke's furious wife. Cyan steps into the massive main hall and greets his father, noting that it has been nearly 15 years since they last spoke face to face. He looks upon Duke Willius Vert, the legendary hero celebrated for stopping massive demon invasions with his overwhelming magic and wisdom. While the world praises the Duke for sacrificing his life to serve others, Cyan quietly brands his father a stupid man for choosing such a path. The Duke crosses his arms, sharply noting that Cyan's eyes perfectly tracked Kranz's sword paths to dodge each strike with flawless precision. The Duke demands to know exactly when Cyan learned how to wield the sword so expertly. Cyan casually lies, claiming he simply practiced alone every night because he didn't want to draw any unnecessary attention to himself. The Duke leans forward, questioning if the brutal beating Cyan delivered after securing victory was truly necessary, prompting Cyan to state he wanted to prove himself. Cyan locks his eyes forward, firmly declaring that he wanted to prove he is fundamentally better than Kranz, despite sharing the same blood. The Duke bursts into an unexpected smile, praising the clear, level-headed answer and stating, Cyan will make an excellent helper for Asha one day. Cyan's mind reels in pure disgust as he realizes his father is still entirely obsessed with molding everyone into a servant for his golden child, Ashel. Gripping his arm tightly, Cyan mentally rejects the forced destiny, resolving instead to completely destroy everything Ashel ever attempts to build. Cyan stuns his father by explicitly demanding to be deployed directly to the brutal, active battlefront. He refers to Lamea Valley in Velius, a ferocious battlefield where humanity has engaged in relentless, bloody warfare against demons for hundreds of years. The Duke stubbornly opposes the request at first, but finally sets a condition, giving Cyan exactly 1 month to prove he is worthy of the front line. Cyan returns to his quarters and collapses onto his bed, determined to maximize his physical strength and tap into his latent mana within the given time. Suddenly, a loud shout echoes through the corridor as a figure clad in dark garments bursts into the room, catching Cyan completely off guard. Cyan clutches his chest in surprise as he recognizes the intense, blue-haired girl as his older sister, Alice Vert. Alice furiously reveals she heard about his insane request to join the battlefront, berating him for letting a single victory over Kranz go to his head. She commands Cyan to follow her to the rooftop immediately, drawing her weapon and vowing to allow his deployment only if he can endure her strikes for 3 minutes. Alice instantly lunges with a powerful, magic-infused strike, forcing the young Cyan to rely entirely on rapid evasion to survive the explosive opening move. Onlookers watch in pure disbelief, shouting that Alice is going completely all out against a brother who is 7 years younger than her. Alice unleashes a flurry of heavy swings, noting that Cyan's light rapier is barely keeping up with her rapid onslaught. Cyan manages to redirect the kinetic force of another heavy blow, causing Alice to wonder if his incredible evasion is merely a stroke of pure luck. The rooftop erupts in a shower of sparks as Cyan ducks and weaves through another devastating combination, panting heavily from the extreme exertion. Alice's blades glow with an intense, vibrant energy as she continues to push Cyan to the absolute edge of the rooftop. Alice fiercely presses the assault, but Cyan utilizes his refined past-life techniques to twist his blade midway through, narrowly averting a lethal counter. Cyan notes that his movements are inherently restricted because his past swordsmanship from Mist consists entirely of lethal, single-strike assassination skills. Panting heavily as the time limit draws near, Alice begins chanting a spell, calling upon the elements of earth and wind to act as her blade. Cyan's eyes widen in shock as a massive aura erupts, realizing his sister is unleashing high-tier 6th-star magic known as Aquablade. Alice desperately screams that she cannot lose, while Cyan realizes that attempting to block such massive force will blow him right off the castle walls. Cyan braces his body and prepares to risk everything on a high-stakes counter, silently pleading for his technique to hold out against the magical storm. Just as the lethal magic is unleashed, a sudden shadow drops from above, forcefully intervening to halt the devastating clash mid-air. The dust settles to reveal Olkin, the Duke's personal guardian knight, who firmly tells Alice that she is being far too harsh against a younger sibling. Cyan lowers his training weapon, quietly noting that he was wondering exactly when the hidden guardian knight would finally choose to reveal himself. Alice deactivates her magic and huffs, claiming she only wanted to stop Cyan from throwing his life away on a suicidal battlefield. Cyan watches her leave, acknowledging that his sister was always considered the absolute elite of elite within the prestigious Royal Academy. He recalls that despite her rigorous training, she met a tragic, bloody end shortly after officially joining the Knights of Light in his original timeline. Olkin turns to Cyan, declaring that he will protect him this time, prompting Cyan to ask if he is acting under the direct orders of the Duke. Olkin confirms his mission to guard the young master, leaving Cyan to realize his father has been secretly monitoring his growth ever since he left the main office. The following day, Alice officially departs back to the academy, leaving Cyan entirely alone to face his brutal preparation period. 2 weeks into his training, Cyan collapses onto the grass in sheer exhaustion, realizing his current 10-year-old body has hit a hard physical wall. Groaning in frustration, Cyan recognizes that he desperately needs an immediate solution to bypass his physical limitations. Emily walks into the room holding a vile, foul-smelling substance, which Cyan identifies as rare hellhounds, blood sourced directly from the black market. Cyan notes that while the blood of demonic beasts is universally feared as a sickening, burning poison, it holds a hidden property. He knows from his extensive past life experience that safely digesting this substance will permanently and drastically increase a warrior's mana and baseline strength. Cyan chugs the burning crimson liquid down in a single, massive gulp, enduring the excruciating heat before declaring with a fierce grin that it works perfectly. Telling a bewildered Emily that he is heading out for a walk, Cyan immediately slips away from the main estate grounds. Stepping onto the rugged mountain paths directly behind the castle, Cyan seeks out a hidden location where the natural flow of mana heavily concentrates. He recalls that in his past life, Ashel claimed to receive a divine revelation about an ancient temple hidden deep within these exact mountains. Cyan smirks as he navigates the rocky cliffs, noting that Ashel hasn't even received that divine message yet in this timeline, allowing Cyan to steal the prize first. Cyan descends a massive, ancient stone staircase, marveling at the colossal subterranean ruins hidden right beneath his family's territory. He reflects on how this ancient temple once served the god of light, Lumendel, before its entire history was violently erased during the Great War 300 years ago. Cyan approaches a grand altar to find a massive, ornate holy blade floating in a radiant vortex of ancient geometric magic. He identifies the relic as Duran Dark, the legendary holy weapon blessed by the deity that ultimately secured humanity's victory against the demon race. Cyan grimaces as he remembers that in his original future, this exact sword was claimed by Ashel and used to deliver Cyan's own pitiful death strike. He places his hand directly onto the relic, but lets out a disappointed sigh when absolutely nothing happens upon contact. Walking past the brilliant light, Cyan spots an otherworldly shadow flickering on the stone floor and smiles, declaring that he has finally found what he was looking for. Cyan kneels before the dark anomaly, noting that where there is overwhelming light, an equally powerful darkness must always exist. Cyan discovers a hidden pathway containing a long staircase that bypasses the holy relic entirely. The hidden passage leads him directly into another chamber, concealed right beneath the altar of light, forcing him to push past the sudden strain on his body. A sudden blast of raw magical power echoes through the chamber as Cyan faces the center of the room. Cyan extends his hand and firmly grips the weapon hilt, greeting his true blade, the legendary demonic sword, Karam. The raw, malevolent energy forces an intense scream of agony to echo out during the sudden contact. Weaving his blade through the air, Cyan confidently greets Karam and asks the ancient weapon if she is still sleeping. Pink, magical energy flares out aggressively as Cyan holds the blade tight, noting the faint presence of her power wrapping around the steel. Cyan balances his footing and smiles mischievously, reveling in the deeply familiar power and stating he wants to cut something down immediately. The sentient weapon answers back with a wicked laugh, asking if the young child has any fear or understands what it means to awake her. Cyan maintains a completely steady gaze as the dark presence towers over him, demanding answers for waking a sleeping demonic weapon. The chaotic aura ripples out as Karam warns the boy that it is far too late to harbor any regrets. A menacing spiritual form flares to life as the weapon roars that his physical body belongs to her now. Violent shockwaves tear through the stone floor as Cyan immediately fights back against the intense spiritual pressure. Cyan locks his eyes forward and firmly counters her claims, declaring that this sword already belongs entirely to him. A heavy spiritual force is violently deflected as Cyan swings out, ordering the parasitic consciousness to back off. Energy flares outward as Cyan delivers a rapid strike, shifting his weight across the stone floor to keep total control. The blade reels back in shock, frantically demanding to know who he is and if he could possibly be the successor. Recognizing the familiar dark presence, Karam asks why she feels the aura of the darkness. "God! Iru!" prompting Cyan to confirm his identity as Eru's successor. Cyan orders the weapon to bow down to her master, causing a massive burst of purple light as Karam desperately refuses to accept it. The two forces violently collide in a flurry of sparks, forcing Cyan to realize that mere words will not be enough to tame the weapon. Cyan prepares his next move, knowing the weapon intends to permanently hijack his body, but resolves to go a bit easy to avoid breaking his target. Cyan focuses his mind completely, channeling his immense authority into a concentrated magical technique. The dark consciousness is violently suppressed and driven into the stone floor, as Cyan firmly states he will only warn her once. Karam lunges forward one last time, only to be hammered back by successive bursts of absolute suppression, magic. Heavy shock waves completely shatter the surrounding space, as Cyan commands total control over the submissive weapon. Cyan asks if she has had enough, forcing the defeated weapon to collapse prone and finally accept him as her master. With the contract fully sealed, Cyan returns his blade to its sheath and decides it is finally time to head back. The demonic weapon manifests an energetic presence, shouting with joy about finally breathing fresh air after centuries of confinement. Karam shifts into a small form and curiously asks her new master for his name, to which he answers, "Cyan Vert." The weapon admits she has never heard of such a name, prompting Cyan to explain that he already died once before in a past life. Karam watches him in utter shock, noting that he truly speaks with complete knowledge of the future. Cyan places his hand over the sealed hilt as a subtle, residual magic pulses through the chamber. He leaves the ancient ruins behind, quietly pondering the mysterious circumstances surrounding his regression. A heavy black carriage travels along a desolate dirt road as the final deadline approaches. The heavy wooden wheels rattle against the uneven terrain, while Cyan sits inside, contemplating the dangerous path ahead. Cyan safely arrives at the military fortress and presents himself before his father's command desk. Duke Vert stands tall and asks if he remains fully committed to his dangerous request, prompting Cyan to state, his heart already belongs on the front lines. The Duke commands his guard to step forward, pulling out a rare item to initiate the official test. Cyan recognizes the item as a high-tier magic scroll as the guard forcefully triggers the containment spell. A massive explosion of smoke and debris rocks the center of the courtyard, forcing Cyan to brace his feet against the gale. A massive, demonic beast with glowing red eyes materializes from the swirling dust, roaring aggressively at the young boy. Cyan calmly evaluates the target, identifying it as a low-rank beast brought straight from the dangerous Lamea Valley. Cyan draws his steel and cleanly steps past a heavy swipe, wondering if the nearby guards plan to intervene if the situation turns lethal. The Duke watches from the balcony, sternly reminding Cyan that he must bear absolute responsibility for his choices and prove his resolve by surviving this trial. Cyan grips his training sword tight, completely unfazed by the harsh words of the trial. With only 3 days left before his official deployment deadline, Cyan surprises his guardian knight by requesting a high-intensity duel. Cyan explains that he needs to gauge the flow of a genuine fight, leaving the veteran knight to suggest that a child his own age like Kranz would be a better fit. Cyan sighs heavily, noting that Kranz treats him like a complete monster and runs away at top speed whenever they cross paths. Olkin accepts the sudden challenge but sets a clear condition, declaring he will only utilize his heavy sword sheath for the match. Olkin vows to focus entirely on defense, while Cyan thanks him for agreeing to the match. Cyan steps into a low stance, declaring that this spar is an absolute command regardless of what happens next. Olkin blinks in surprise at the boy's sudden shift in posture as Cyan locks his eyes forward with absolute intensity. Cyan charges forward like a gale, unleashing a blistering sword strike that forces a heavy clash against Olkin's defensive sheath. Olkin absorbs the kinetic impact, noting that the strike was incredibly heavy for a child's frame, as Cyan immediately pivots for a follow-up. Cyan shifts his footing rapidly, aiming to slip past the knight's blind spot as the battle moves across the stone courtyard. Steel and wood collide in rapid succession as Cyan drives forward with a barrage of precise thrusts. Cyan executes a sweeping turn to redirect a parry, forcing Ulkin to move his entire body to maintain his absolute defense. Cyan pushes his body to its absolute limits, grunting from the immense physical strain of matching a veteran warrior. Cyan stops his assault and catches his breath, admitting he still lacks the raw strength to break through Ulkin's defense, before thanking him for the training. Ulkin returns his weapon to his side, looking at the young master in absolute awe over his impossible growth. Cyan locks his eyes forward, confident that his refined battle instincts will allow him to overcome any trial his father sets. The trial beast charges forward in a frenzy, unleashing a torrent of flames across the training grounds. Cyan safely rolls through the blast, keeping his eyes glued to the target as he prepares his counterattack. The beast snaps its jaws violently, but Cyan maintains absolute focus as he reads the trajectory of the attack. Cyan lunges forward with a radiant energy strike, driving his blade cleanly through the monster's defenses. Cyan recognizes that prolonged combat will break his current body, resolving to finish the creature as quickly as possible. He ducks beneath a massive swipe, exhaling a sharp breath as he positions himself for a lethal thrust. With a sudden burst of speed, Cyan drives his blade straight through the creature's weak point, ending the trial in an instant. The massive beast collapses heavily onto the dirt as the nearby commanders gather to evaluate the impressive victory. Cyan looks down at the carcass, silently noting that using his true demonic abilities here would make the guards think he is completely insane. Cyan ponders if he should carry a container to harvest the blood later, as Duke Vert steps forward to praise his performance. The Duke formally approves his deployment, telling Cyan that he will see him directly at the dangerous front lines. Cyan offers his gratitude to his father as a faint whisper echoes from the sentient sword at his waist. Kyram angrily demands to know she looks like a common kitchen knife, furiously ordering her master to wield her in a real fight. The spirit begs for a single taste of blood, while Cyan silently commands the weapon to remain patient. Cyan reassures the demonic sword that he will soon utilize her lethal power to his heart's absolute content. Kyram roars back through their mental link, snapping that he should have awakened her much sooner if he intended to fight monsters. A panicked scout screams a warning across the outpost, alerting the active squads to an ogre threat in the northwest. The frontier commander barks out immediate orders to establish a defensive line and deploy the containment magic. A massive burst of magical light envelops the battlefield as the frontline knights struggle to hold back the rampaging giant. A veteran warrior is brought to his knees by a brutal blow, but immediately fires back with a heavy swing amidst the chaotic fray. The massive monster bellows in rage as an armored knight lunges forward with a vicious sword strike. Steel slices through thick hide as the frontline vanguard locks into a desperate struggle against the beast. A powerful shockwave rips through the dirt path, forcing the surrounding infantry to brace against the immense kinetic force. The vanguard unleashes a flurry of heavy blows to crack the monster's defenses, panting heavily from the extreme exertion. The giant collapses heavily onto the rocky terrain as the surrounding troops clear the immediate area. A worried squad member asks the young master why he volunteered for such a hellish place, while Cyan looks out at the crimson horizon with a sense of pure nostalgia. Cyan mutters that the place is just as hellish as always, while his father walks up to ask how it feels to finally stand on the front lines. The Duke warns him that death can strike at any moment in this desolate wasteland, prompting Cyan to promise he will keep that reality in mind. Advanced knights maintain a constant perimeter, engaging in 3 to 4 brutal skirmishes every single day to keep the monsters from crossing the border. Cyan returns to his personal quarters, noting that his assigned tent sits in the innermost section where the guard discipline is exceptionally tight. Cyan wonders if he must wait around until dinner time, when a sudden clatter draws his attention to Emily's frantic movements. Emily vents her frustration about the extreme danger, prompting a serious response about her option to pack up and return to the main estate. Emily firmly refuses, stating that someone must stay behind to properly care for the young master amidst all these wild monsters. She demands that he move so she can prepare the meal, while Cyan quietly asks if she managed to secure the specialized cape he requested. Cyan adjusts his gear inside the dim tent, wrapping himself in the dark fabric to hide his presence. Cyan confirms his gear is ready, while Emily asks with a sigh if he truly intends to exercise outside, even in a place like this. She notes his intense diligence, while Cyan instructs her to handle things as usual while he slips out under the cover of night. Emily agrees to cover for him by pretending he is fast asleep, allowing Cyan to slip past the reinforced night guards patrolling the fortress walls. Cyan steps into the dark wilderness, noting that moving during the midnight guard rotation is the absolute best time to avoid detection. Cyan unleashes the third move of his shadow style, calling upon Fog's descent to completely mask his physical form. He notes that the outer valleys are packed with high-tier monsters, making it the perfect training ground to unleash Karam's true power. Cyan addresses his sword, prompting a manic response from Karam as she revels in the overpowering scent of fresh blood. Surrounded by swirling red energy, the demonic blade begs her master to let her cut down their prey immediately. A massive beast emerges from the shadows with glowing red eyes, facing Cyan's steady blade. Cyan grins and gives the word, allowing Karam to fully unleash her bloodlust against the oncoming pack. The monsters lunge forward aggressively, only to be met by a devastating explosion of magical sword strikes. Cyan carves through the front ranks with blinding speed, leaving a trail of severed limbs and shattered stone across the valley. The fierce combat echoes through the rocky terrain under a starlit sky as Cyan maintains a relentless offensive rhythm. Cyan grunts from the physical strain, driving his blade home to finish the remaining stragglers before wiping the blood from his gear. Karam unleashes a wave of pink energy, sighing with absolute ecstasy over feeling so refreshed after her long slumber. Cyan promises to keep up this intense training, while the weapon wonders how many small fry they must slaughter to truly grow stronger. Cyan reassures her that the night is still incredibly young, and the surrounding valley remains packed with dangerous beasts. A royal caravan moves quietly through the mountainous pass as a dark-clothed guard reiterates that the front lines are far too dangerous for a tour. The guard suggests turning back, but the imperial princess firmly counters that she is bound by royal duty to assist her father on his inspection tours. She sharply warns her escort that she will get genuinely angry if he mentions retreating again before turning her thoughts to a new topic. The princess notes that Duke Vert brought his youngest son-in-law, prompting the guard to explain that the boy volunteered for the front lines completely on his own. The princess huffs arrogantly, claiming she doesn't care about such trivial matters before heading to her quarters to rest. Once inside, she pauses and quietly asks her attendant for the specific name of the Duke's youngest child. The attendant answers that the boy's name is Cyan Vert, leaving the princess to repeat the name to herself in deep contemplation. An armored vanguard commander delivers a heavy strike to clear a path, shouting for his squad to check the area for casualties. The scouts report that everyone is completely unharmed, leaving the Duke to silently evaluate the unusual signs left behind on the terrain. A heavy metal boot steps near the edge of the clearing as Cyan stands calmly, catching his breath after a stealthy engagement. The Duke approaches his son, asking how he is adjusting to the harsh reality of frontier life. Cyan answers that he is learning something entirely new every day, drawing a contemplative look from his stern father. The Duke instructs Cyan to report directly to the main command tent early tomorrow morning for an important discussion. Cyan watches his father walk away, noting that he has never seen the old man act so unusually kind before. Deep within the outer valley, a massive monster strikes out blindly, forcing Cyan into a sharp defensive maneuver. Cyan identifies the gargantuan threat as a deadly deathworm, while Karam notes his physical struggle and offers to fully take over his body. Cyan grunts against the crushing weight of the attack, muttering that the weapon fails to understand his long-term goals. Recognizing that an ordinary battle will drag on forever, Cyan notes that a month of consuming beast blood has given his body just enough resilience to survive the weapon's strain. Declaring he has no choice, Cyan tells Karam he will play along with her dangerous plan for this single encounter. Cyan triggers his shadow assassination style, unleashing the high-level ninth form, demonic sword manifestation. A vortex of crimson energy explodes outward as Cyan vows to rip the giant creature's thick skin into absolute pieces. Cyan drives forward like a rocket, his blade tearing through the air with unstoppable momentum. He executes the Fog Sword 8, fluttering petals style, unleashing a devastating storm of cutting energy that completely obliterates the monster. Blinding pink light radiates across the rocky canyon as the massive creature is thoroughly systematically dismantled. The final shockwaves echo out through the valley as Cyan lands cleanly, grunting from the sudden backlash of the demonic override. The next morning, the Duke's vanguard discovers the fresh carcass, noting the immense residual mana and wondering if a high-ranking demon was responsible. The scouts evaluate the deep gashes left on the stone, pointing out that the specific sword traces look incredibly precise and familiar. The Duke stares at the wounds in deep thought, questioning if his sudden sense of déjà vu is mere coincidence before a scout calls him over. A guard illuminates the clearing with a magical torch, confirming that the slain beast is indeed a massive deathworm. The commander wonders what kind of impossible force could slaughter a high-level worm so cleanly, prompting the Duke to worry if a certain sinister organization has returned. Cyan rests in his quarters, recalling the absolute danger of letting Karam take full possession of his physical frame during the hunt. He notes that letting his guard down would allow the blade to permanently hijack his mind, making his single-handed hunt an entirely insane gamble. Waking up with a thoroughly sore body, Cyan acknowledges that his intensive consumption of demonic beast blood was the only thing that kept his muscles from completely tearing apart. Karam manifests beside him, noting that his outer appearance is a complete lie because he handles her lethal power with the proficiency of a veteran. Cyan answers that his advanced mastery makes perfect sense, given his explicit explanation that he already died once before in a past timeline. Karam looks at him with intense focus, deducing that anyone powerful enough to kill a master like him must have been the wielder of the holy sword Duran Dark. She notes he was either bested in an official duel or completely betrayed, concluding that his ultimate goal is absolute revenge. The demonic spirit delivers a chilling warning, telling him that she will personally claim his body the exact moment he falters or loses a fight. Cyan snaps at the weapon to know her place, causing a sudden burst of magical energy to rattle the wooden interior of his quarters. Cyan notes that her aggressive personality hasn't changed a bit as he steps outside to find the military camp in a state of complete chaos. Emily greets him frantically as Cyan asks her if something significant has occurred within the outpost lines. Cyan wonders if the guards are panicking over the dead worm, while Emily explains that a high-level monster sighting near the base is an incredibly rare event. Cyan asks if there are any rumors regarding a suspicious person or his own nighttime absence, drawing a confused look from his maid. An elite guard steps forward, cutting off their conversation to announce that the Duke has demanded Cyan's presence immediately. Cyan mentally curses the immense hassle, realizing the sudden arrival of the scouting squads forced him to abandon the carcasses without cleaning up his traces. He laments that his grand plan to enjoy a completely quiet life before his academy admission has been thoroughly derailed by the incident. Cyan enters the Grand Command tent and formally greets his father, trying to maintain a completely neutral expression. Cyan prepares his thoughts, frantically wondering what kind of plausible excuse he can construct if the Duke asks about last night's hunt. He takes a seat under the heavy pressure of his father's steady, calculating gaze. The Duke welcomes him into the command room, telling Cyan to sit down as they begin the formal discussion. The Duke gets straight to the point, demanding to know exactly what his youngest son was doing out in the wilderness last night. Cyan calmly delivers his pre-planned alibi, claiming he was entirely exhausted from training and went to sleep early. The Duke contemplates the answer, wondering if his personal scout was simply overthinking the striking similarities to Cyan's sword style. Cyan shifts the focus, asking if something is bothering his father regarding the current frontier situation. The Duke sighs and mentions the ancient organization known as Mist, noting that it is an infamous syndicate dating back to ancient times. He explains that their ultimate goals remain completely unknown, but they are notorious for leaving behind an unmistakable black fog. The Duke states the group seemingly vanished from the continent 300 years ago, yet the worm carcass from last night was completely shrouded in that exact same substance. He clarifies that the black fog is the signature power left behind by Eru, the god of darkness, and serves as the primary source of the syndicate's strength. Cyan quietly listens, privately amazed that his father managed to precisely pinpoint the exact origin of his shadow techniques. The Duke warns him to remain exceptionally careful while he notifies the Empire, leaving Cyan relieved that his father finds it impossible for a child to be linked to such a group. The Duke concludes that Cyan could never be involved with ancient heathens, before shifting the topic to ask if Cyan knows who is officially visiting the fortress today. Cyan confirms he heard rumors about the Emperor's arrival, prompting the Duke to explain that he requires a specific favor regarding the royal guest. A massive trumpet blast echoes across the outposts as the grand imperial entourage arrives at the front gates. The emperor sits tall on his mount, boisterously telling the duke to drop the rigid formalities since they are lifelong friends. The white-haired monarch looks down, spotting the young child standing beside the commander's greeting line. Cyan kneels respectfully before the monarch, introducing himself as the youngest son of the prestigious House of Vert. Emperor Viliarth expresses deep admiration for his grit, noting that for a boy so young to reside voluntarily on the brutal frontier proves the duke's children are entirely different from ordinary nobility. Cyan notes that in his past life, he was always confined inside the family mansion whenever the emperor visited. The emperor steps forward to make a grand introduction, bringing along a special guest who steps onto the floor. The fifth princess of the Ushif Empire introduced herself as Erin Severus, a name Cyan repeats under his breath in deep contemplation. The duke looks directly down at Cyan and delivers his official command, assigning him to escort Princess Erin for the day. Cyan reacts with complete surprise while his father calmly tells him there is no need to be so shocked by a simple task to keep her company. Cyan recalls seeing her at the academy in his past life and recognizes that forming an early acquaintance with the royal family holds no real harm. Though he harbors absolutely no personal desire to do it, Cyan respects his father's underlying strategy. He realizes the Duke wishes for them to forge a lifelong friendship similar to his own bond with the Emperor, but notes his father has picked the wrong candidate. Looking down at the royal guest, Cyan silently resolves that this girl can never truly become a friend of his. He remains cautious about her true connections, reflecting on the grim nature of royal court politics. As standard military skirmishes echo across the outer limits, Cyan turns back to his duties with a hesitant expression. Erin points toward the landscape and demands to know why a certain river runs completely crimson, prompting Cyan to identify it as the infamous Blood River cutting through Lamea Valley. Cyan explains that old, injured, and weak demonic beasts instinctively plunge into the current to perish, leaving the waters heavily contaminated with decomposing corpses and fluids. Erin recoils in absolute disgust and immediately asks what lies at the final destination of the Red Stream. Cyan reveals that following the flow leads straight into the demon realm where the Demon King resides, adding with a smirk that no sane person would ever try to go there. He walks along the ridge until a massive, sudden explosion rocks the distant valley, drawing their attention to the defensive wall. A yellow distress flare shoots into the dark sky, signaling a massive oncoming wave of demonic beasts targeting the western sentry post. The Vanguard commander roars an immediate order to protect the monarch while rallying the Guardian Knight division to reinforce the third outpost. The Emperor stops his old friend from holding him back, sharply asking the Duke if he truly thinks the sovereign traveled all this way just to go on a casual hike. The Duke concedes to the monarch's fierce will, officially commanding all available troops to dive directly into the demonic beast raid and slaughter the monsters. The Duke orders Cyan to join the active fray, prompting the princess to demand why Cyan shouldn't simply head to a secure shelter instead. Cyan snaps at her, stating that the battlefield is a literal slaughterhouse where people die every second rather than a safe playground for children. Cyan commands his Guardian Knight to substitute the royal escort, prompting Olkin to immediately step forward and escort Her Highness back to the safe barracks. Erin screams that he is incredibly impudent, but Cyan fixes her with a deadly gaze, asking if she can bear the absolute responsibility for all the lives at risk here. Cyan turns his back and delivers a brutal final warning, telling her to retreat immediately if she intends to cry like a helpless toddler. Massive, fleshy monstrosities crash heavily over the wooden perimeter stakes as a frantic close-quarters melee erupts across the trenches. Armored knights lunge forward with heavy sword strikes, screaming to hold the lines and slay every single monster to safeguard the Emperor. Frontline warriors plunge headfirst into the chaotic fray with savage battle cries, carving through the oncoming wave of beasts. Cyan recalls the intricate structure of the imperial family, noting that Emperor Dione Severus had two official wives, though the first empress has since passed away. The former empress bore the first two princesses, while the current empress delivered the two older princes, leaving the fifth princess as an outsider. Erin Severus was actually a bastardized child born to a peasant mistress, causing the court to look down upon her mixed blood, though she fiercely ignored their perception. She steadfastly fulfilled her royal duties, but would eventually be framed for treason by jealous factions, cast out of the empire, and rumored to die alone of disease and exile. Because of her tragic fate, history remembered her as the tragic princess, prompting Cyan to reflect that she could have survived if she stayed devoid of ambition. Cyan weaves through the active battlefield, noting that the harsh brutality around him is the true reality of high-stakes royal politics. A massive horned monster unleashes lightning energy across the dirt right before a devastating impact shatters its heavy armor plates. Monsters scream in agony as brilliant static arcs rip through the trenches, clearing out whole clusters of attackers. The Emperor unleashes high-level holy lightning magic, demonstrating the overwhelming capability that would have made him the head of the Mage Association. Cyan watches the spectacular display, confidently noting that a mid-rank demonic beast poses absolutely no threat to a monarch who treats warfare as a mere hobby. Back in the strategy tent, the Emperor relaxes over a cold bottle of alcohol, admitting he feels somewhat lonely, being the only person currently drinking. The Emperor transitions to serious matters, mentioning an alarming surge in high-profile noble assassinations across the Ushif Empire that is spreading widespread anxiety. He reveals that all the murdered nobles were notoriously corrupt officials, adding that an ominous black fog was found lingering at every single crime scene. The Duke admits he discovered those exact magical traces here yesterday, noting he appreciates someone taking out the imperial garbage. The Emperor crosses his arms, revealing a deeper concern regarding corrupt nobles who are loudly attempting to pin the blame on the 5th princess. The Duke reacts in shock at the plot to frame Princess Erin, while the monarch states he has been shrugging the accusations off as absolute nonsense. The Emperor warns that a dangerous faction is actively trying to manipulate her, pleading with the Duke as a personal friend to protect the child if he should perish first. The Duke matches his friend's intense gaze and firmly vows that he will carry out the imperial command to total completion. The pact is sealed in absolute silence as Cyan steps back out into the pouring rain, contemplating his current restrictions. A fellow scout teases Cyan about his interaction with the princess, joking that he will never get married at this rate, which prompts an annoyed retort from Cyan. Cyan ignores the teasing and prepares his gear to head out for another round of high-intensity training, despite the heavy downpour. Suddenly, a figure blocks his path in the dim corridor, causing Cyan to freeze and demand to know who is confronting him. The shadow steps into the light to reveal Princess Erin, who politely asks if they can speak together for a moment if he isn't busy. A nearby maid gasps in complete shock at her sudden appearance inside the barracks as a heavy crack of thunder echoes outside. Erin notes that Cyan has been stationed at the outpost for about a month, prompting him to bluntly ask why she came to see him. Emily awkwardly steps away from the room, telling them to have a wonderful time together, which leaves Cyan standing in absolute, silent discomfort. Erin lowers her head, offering a quiet apology for her earlier arrogant behavior on the battlefield, while Cyan stiffly tells her she doesn't need to worry about it. She notes that Cyan is highly acknowledged by the family, unlike her, before asking if he is also planning to enter the Royal Academy next term. As she attempts to offer an official handshake, Cyan cuts her off with a cold refusal, stating he cannot be of any tactical help to her. Cyan explicitly commands her to leave if her only intention here is to make casual friends, driving a harsh wedge between them. Erin stares down at the wooden floor with a look of quiet resignation, accepting that there is simply no political benefit in associating with her. She admits she was short-sighted to think they could talk, noting her hands are clasped tight in disappointment. She drops a sudden bombshell, stating Cyan is completely different from Sir Ashel, which causes Cyan's eyes to snap wide in absolute shock. Cyan violently grips her sleeve, fiercely demanding to know exactly how she knows his half-brother. Erin explains she met Ashel during a tour of the academy last year, where he kindly advised her to ignore critics and simply fulfill her royal role. Cyan reels internally, rejecting the idea of his brother's kindness and knowing that demonic bastard's manipulative personality better than anyone else. He realizes Ashel's grand scheme to systematically destroy Princess Erin has already begun, desperately trying to construct a counter-strategy. Suddenly, a panicked cry cuts through the storm as a scout sprints through the archway, screaming for everyone to run immediately. A massive shockwave tears through the camp perimeter, sending stone debris flying and throwing the central sector into pure chaos. Guards shout in pure panic that the young master's tent has been directly hit, scrambling through the smoke to check for survivors. A massive, ominous shadow looms over the burning remnants of the encampment as an explosive roar echoes across the valley. Soldiers scream in horror as a secondary impact completely shatters the wooden structures of the rear guard post. Onlookers cry out for the young master amidst the blazing wreckage, fearing the absolute worst. The Imperial commanders stand under a dark, star-filled sky as the Emperor demands a direct update on the sudden breach. The scouts report that advanced rank demonic beasts have bypassed the walls to ambush the rear camps, prompting the Duke to realize the princess was stationed right in the impact zone. Cyan moves swiftly through the high grass, noting that elite threats like ogres and deathworms should only reside in the deepest trenches of the valley. He deduces that something fundamental has shifted in the beast's migration patterns, wondering if the heavy scent of monster blood on his own body drew them directly to his tent. A weeping survivor looks up in complete shock as Cyan emerges from the smoke, unable to believe the young master survived the initial blast. Further down the ridge, Erin trembles near her guards, crying out that this disaster would have never happened if she hadn't traveled to the frontier. The Imperial Knights stand firm in a defensive ring, reassuring Her Highness that they will fulfill their sworn duty to protect her with their lives. Suddenly, a massive alpha beast erupts from the tree line, triggering an immediate warning cry as it hammers into the guard line. A knight is violently thrown through the air with a painful grunt as the overwhelming strength of the monster scatters their formation. Cyan dives into the fray with his steel drawn, commanding the princess to get back while staring down the muscular beast. Cyan signals his guardian knight to grab the princess and flee, prompting Erin to frantically question what the young master is doing. The gargantuan beast lets out an earth-shaking roar, swinging its massive arms to completely crush the terrain. Cyan parries a heavy claw swipe, realizing the monsters are completely intoxicated by the pungent aroma of the beast blood he consumed during training. Kyram speaks through their mental link, mockingly pointing out that his body reeks of slaughter and has driven the valley predators into a frenzy. The demonic spirit materializes a menacing aura, reminding Cyan that her ultimate goal is to hijack his physical shell. Cyan violently cuts through an oncoming strike, fiercely commanding the parasitic weapon to shut up and obey his movements. A massive brute looms over him, but Cyan coldly stands his ground, completely unconcerned by the scale of the encirclement. As an endless wave of predators roars and lunges forward, Cyan drops into a low stance and prepares a rapid assassination dash. He cleanly severs the tendons of the lead monster, stepping past the falling carcass as he notes that no human eyes are left to watch him. With his cover completely clear, Cyan decides to let Karam feast on the blood of these high-tier beasts, spotting an unexpected anomaly further down the canyon. A massive silhouette with purple scales crashes into the rocky canyon, revealing an incredibly rare, rogue dragon hatchling. Karam goes completely wild with greed, screaming that it doesn't matter why a dragon is here because they must manifest their true power to capture and consume it. Cyan channels his forbidden dark mana, launching himself directly at the scaled beast in an explosion of sparks and kinetic force. Meanwhile, the Duke and the Emperor stand over the vanquished vanguard monsters at the primary wall, confirming the sector is finally clear. The Emperor urgently demands updates on his daughter and Cyan, but the scouts admit they lost all tracks past the ruined tent lines. The Duke coldly states there is no need to worry, declaring that a true member of the House of Vert must always possess the independent strength to watch out for himself. A scout arrives with Princess Erin in tow, who runs straight to her father and frantically begs the army to send immediate reinforcements to save Cyan. The princess identifies Emily amidst the ruins, confirming that Cyan intentionally stayed behind to act as a decoy so they could escape. Emily trembles under the Duke's terrifying presence, weeping as she explains exactly where the young master made his final, desperate stand. The Emperor commands his forces to move out instantly, but the Duke steps forward and flatly refuses to initiate a rescue operation. The royal party stares at the commander in utter disbelief, as the Duke firmly states that securing the border defense remains their absolute priority. He argues that allowing a monster breakthrough will devastate the Empire, choosing to focus entirely on structural reconstruction to prevent further human casualties. An officer questions the fate of the youngest son, but the Duke coldly replies that Cyan has simply fulfilled his required duty to facilitate the evacuation. Eren watches the troops turn back, completely crushed by the brutal, unfeeling nature of the family patriarch. Deep in the canyon, Cyan unleashes a continuous barrage of sword strikes, his blade generating massive waves of pressure against his targets. The dragon rolls through a heavy explosion, snapping its jaws as Cyan pivots mid-air to execute another rapid descent. Cyan reflects that dragons are ancient creatures residing closest to the Creator, holding a noble status that inferior humans dare not easily approach. He notes, "It is a rare honor to face one," but curses the immense hassle of being dragged across the open sky where he risks exposing his hidden identity to observers below. He clings to the beast's neck under a blood-red moon, dodging frantic claw swipes as the dragon roars in pure rage. Cyan struggles to maintain his grip, muttering that all he wanted was to harvest some high-tier blood and never anticipated getting dragged into an aerial war. The dragon snaps its massive jaws as Cyan coats his weapon in a swirling vortex of dark crimson energy. Cyan orders the scaled mongrel to screw off, screaming that he doesn't have a single second of spare time to waste out here. Cyan triggers his signature assassination mechanics, unleashing the devastating rushing fogstorm style against the beast's flank. The blade cuts deep into the purple scales with an explosive crunch, forcing a painful grunt from Cyan as the kinetic backlash rattles his body. The dragon counters by channeling its inner core, unleashing a brilliant, blinding wave of purple breath magic across the sky. Cyan shields his eyes against the radiant blast, using a quick parry to redirect the magical pressure before plunging back into the smoke. Surrounded by a blazing aura of dark red energy, Cyan roars that the beast is being entirely too rude for their very first meeting. He commands the dragon to take his blade directly to the face, driving his steel down into the core of the monster. A massive shockwave rips through the upper atmosphere as Cyan slides along the scaled back, absorbing the immense vibration. A giant sword silhouette descends through the cloud line, engulfed in roaring red flames as Cyan prepares his absolute final combo. Shouting into the gale, Cyan triggers his forbidden style, swordless. 8 fluttering petals. The attack lands with a succession of shattering impacts, systematically dismantling the dragon's primary wing joints and forcing a rapid descent. The massive lizard desperately thrashes to throw him off, but Cyan vows he won't fall for the exact same survival trick twice. Cyan hooks his arm into the scales to lock them together, acknowledging he has used up every single drop of his luck for this single encounter. Karam screams through their mental link, furiously demanding to know why her master is hesitating to unleash her full demonic form to finish the job. Cyan snaps back, gesturing toward the army station directly below and stating he will be burned at the stake as a heathen if anyone witnesses his forbidden powers. As they plunge through a sheet of lightning, the weapon demands to know if his grand plan is simply to ride the dying monster all the way to the dirt. Suddenly, the sky above flares with a catastrophic light as Duke Vert charges his ultimate 8-star area of effect destruction magic, the secret sword of the heavens. Cyan looks up at the incoming magical apocalypse, mockingly praising his father for truly living up to his cold title as the continent's guardian. The massive spell rips through the atmosphere, completely engulfing the dragon in a blinding, destructive pillar of pure energy. Cyan jumps clear off of the dissolving dragon at the very last second, using a rapid spin to break away from the lethal crossfire. Karam mocks his positioning, asking if his ultimate goal is to shatter his body on the solid terrain below. Spotting an alternative landing zone, Cyan resolves to dive headfirst directly into the putrid current of the Blood River to cushion his terminal fall. Deep within the shadows of the lower valley, a group of highly powerful mystery figures track the anomalous energy signature cutting across the sky. The lead tracker notes the creature was a mere hatchling that wandered into severe trouble, deducing that an exceptionally powerful force must be operating nearby. A scholar with glasses identifies the lingering dark energy signature, while his comrade prepares to move out and investigate the exact coordinates. The warrior promises not to slaughter everything he encounters out of mere boredom before disappearing into the dense valley fog. Cyan forcefully drags his heavily bruised, waterlogged body onto the muddy riverbanks, coughing up fluids and fighting to maintain consciousness after his narrow escape. Lying flat on his back on the cold ground, Cyan curses his current situation as water surges around them, Karam anxiously shouts out to see if Cyan is still alive. Cyan snaps back, telling Karam not to even speak to him while he contemplates exactly how he should kill him. Energy crackles through the air as Cyan tries to force himself to get it together. A reassuring voice tells him not to worry, realizing that something incredibly fun was waiting for them and that there was no way they would randomly stumble across a higher demon here. Cyan desperately yells for it to stop, recognizing a voice that is so deeply embedded into the very tracks of his brain. Stepping forward with intense momentum, Cyan looks toward the formidable figure standing on the rocky outcrop and identifies him as the Demon King, Valkyrian. Blinding, magical energy erupts across the terrain as an intense confrontation hangs in the balance. Cyan stumbles back in shock, his mind racing as the memory of that deeply embedded voice echoes once again. Valkyrian demands to know if Cyan is a human, standing tall amidst the magical debris. Cyan stares into the deep canyon, fixated on the terrifying visage of the Demon King, who wields absolute power. In his past life, every single person who ever witnessed this entity claimed that it felt like staring directly at the embodiment of pure evil. That very same catastrophic nightmare is exactly what stands right in front of Cyan at this very moment. Wielding his glowing blade, Cyan curses under his breath as the weight of the battle presses down on him. Valkyrian presses further, coldly asking if he is human and why he refuses to answer the question. With an intense glare, the Demon King asks Cyan if a mere kid like him actually wants to fight. Cyan grunts in pain as swords clash, creating a massive shockwave that rattles the surroundings. Spells explode across the floor, leaving Cyan surprised and struggling to comprehend the massive gap in strength. Valkyrian mentions hearing that Cyan's kind possesses infinite potential, leaving Karam to panic and ask who this terrifying figure is, only for Cyan to reveal it is the Demon King himself. Karam finds it entirely impossible to believe, prompting Cyan to realize that his only viable option right now is to try and run away. As strikes crash and tear up the earth, Cyan harbored doubts about whether he can even survive against a monster like Valkyrian. Valkyrian looks down lazily, asking what he is even supposed to do against a little kid. The Demon King promises he has no intention of harming him, leaving Cyan completely shocked when the massive threat suddenly lies right down on the ground. Valkyrian demands to know exactly how Cyan managed to get all the way into this realm. Deducing that Cyan was swept in by the water currents, Valkyrian asks if this is his very first time in the demon realm. Staring closely, Valkyrian notes that Cyan is just a normal human, yet it strangely feels like Cyan already knows who he is. Cyan deflects by claiming they have never met before, which Valkyrian accepts since he has never actually seen a human prior to today. Cyan is unnerved by the Demon King's completely relaxed manner, as Valkyrian explains he felt a strange energy while making his rounds. Valkyrian boasts that as the Demon King, it is only natural for him to watch over the lands he rules, causing Cyan to tensely interrupt and call him a kid. Valkyrian is taken aback, asking if Cyan is not even a little bit shocked to be standing in front of the ruler of demons. Cyan knows that if things progress exactly like his past life, the brutal demon invasion will begin incredibly soon. Back then, the entire world was completely consumed by a devastating crimson tide of mana, leaving Cyan to wonder what could have possibly triggered this relaxed ruler to change so drastically. Cyan looks the Demon King in the eye and asks what it is he truly wishes to accomplish. His expression turns terrifyingly cold as he warns that if anyone dares to get in the way of that simple wish, he will ruthlessly slaughter them all. Valkyrian asserts that this absolute elimination of threats is his fundamental duty as the Demon King. Cyan feels a sudden chill, recognizing the brief flash of the true monstrosity that slaughtered humanity in his past life. He realizes those dark impulses are merely chained up right now, meaning some specific future incident will inevitably shatter those seals. Determined to prevent that tragic catalyst from ever occurring, Cyan looks at the ruler and asks if he wants to make a deal. Cyan warns him that a major event will happen very soon that directly threatens the safety of the people he rules over. Valkyrian demands to know what he is talking about, but Cyan admits he does not know the exact details of the incident. He is certain, however, that the coming event will trigger a catastrophic war between humans and demons, prompting Valkyrian to ask if Cyan implies he will be forced to take human lands. Cyan demands a firm promise that the Demon King will not start a war, no matter what happens in the future. Valkyrian asks what he will receive in return for such a massive commitment, and Cyan confidently promises that he will personally help him. Cyan vows that no matter what kind of disaster falls upon the demon realm, he will do his absolute best to aid the king. Valkyrian chuckles darkly, realizing Cyan definitely knows secret information before demanding to know his name. The young warrior stands tall and proudly introduces himself as Cyan Vert. Valkyrian accepts the terms, swearing as the absolute owner of the demon realm that he will not invade human lands no matter what happens. A powerful impact seals the pact as Valkyrian warns Cyan that he better take full responsibility for his end of the promise. Valkyrian notes that a deal is a deal, leaving Cyan to smile subtly now that the historic agreement is finally complete. Princess Erin stands firm, repeating her blunt demand for Cyan to belong to her. Cyan stands in stunned silence as the gravity of her bizarre behavior sinks in. She acts entirely entitled, treating the arrangement as an obvious certainty. Cyan sits back, thoroughly annoyed by her presence, knowing full well that she currently possesses absolutely no power. He thinks about how obvious her trajectory seems, but his mind keeps flashing back to a dark reality. Cyan cannot shake the knowledge that a vile individual is heavily involved in orchestrating her eventual, tragic demise. The girl looks down, conceding that as she stands right now, she cannot bring any real benefit to Cyan or anyone else. She acknowledges that she lacks any real influence or proper etiquette, yet Cyan calmly states that he will watch her from afar. She gasps in surprise and his willingness to watch her, prompting Cyan to tell her not to be disappointed. The girl cuts him off, claiming she completely understands what he means. Pointing directly at him, she fiercely vows that she will become so immensely powerful in the future that he will be entirely unable to ignore her. Before walking away, she looks back with deep sincerity and explicitly thanks Cyan just for being alive. Later, Cyan sits thoughtfully on his bed as heavy, panicked breathing echoes through a dark forest. Deep in the shadows, a smuggler laughs gleefully while holding a glowing, magical artifact, noting that there is not much time left. Cyan steps out from the darkness with furious eyes, calling out the smuggler by his true name, Reynold Crimson. As Reynold realizes his body suddenly cannot move, Cyan examines the small dimension box, noting that its commercialization has not even happened yet in this current era. The cube floats with massive mana, representing the legendary, infinite storage masterpiece created by the Garum Kingdom's Mage Association. Cyan reveals he has been keeping a close eye on this operation for an entire year, stepping through the flames to confront his target. The smuggler is identified as Reynold Crimson, a highly formidable 7-star mage knight from the Garum Kingdom who recognizes his young interloper. Reynold is blown back by a shockwave, demanding to know exactly why Cyan is standing here in the middle of this snowy wasteland. Cyan mentions that a cohort named Alice was the one who managed to secure the Hellhound blood, leaving Reynold furious and demanding to know who betrayed them. Reynold curses his capture, but suddenly launches a vicious counterattack, screaming for Cyan to die and declaring that letting your guard down results in death. A massive, fiery explosion rips through the clearing as Reynold unleashes his full destructive Mage Knight capabilities. Catching his breath amidst the roaring flames, Reynold pants heavily and notes that the terrifying rumors about Cyan's prowess are entirely true. Reynold laments, losing the precious dimension box during transit, just as Cyan strikes again through the smoke. Swirling dark fog completely encircles Reynold, leaving him terrified and screaming about the pitch-black mist trapping him. Reynold grunts in agony as Cyan demands he hand over the details of the smuggling route and the identity of the spy, if he wants a comfortable death. Cyan glares with terrifying eyes, asking if Reynold would rather suffer a demise so tragic that even Satan himself would pray for his soul. The scene shifts to the bustling western border trading post of Velius, where mysterious chests are dropped off. Guards notice 2 unexpected boxes and eagerly open them to see how much loot is inside, only to scream in absolute horror. They look inside to discover the bloody, severed remains of Sir Reynold packed neatly away. Cyan and Karam look out over the landscape, asking Cyan if he really plans to just leave those remaining smugglers alone. Cyan looks back at the Gothic Academy, knowing it is a place where mages, insanely obsessed with the foundations of magic, gather. Cyan states that these mages will do horrific things with demonic beast blood in the future, prompting his companion to joke about him becoming a selfless problem solver, which Cyan tells him to shut up about. Deep within a grand residence of the Ushiv Empire, Cyan's elite older brother discovers that Cyan has gone out to the front lines with their father. The blonde young master notes that Cyan has been severely getting on his nerves lately. He crosses his arms coldly, declaring that he will have to personally go out and see his younger brother. Soldiers rejoice that they are finally leaving the gloomy front lines for the academy, while Cyan quietly notes that the true hell is just beginning for him. In reality, the Grand Academy is an elite institution entirely rife with deadly politics, hidden schemes, and faction warfare. As female students gossip excitedly about handsome instructors, Cyan remains completely detached from the trivial chatter. Cyan steps firmly onto the urban stone paths, immediately startling a blonde youth named Kranz. Kranz stammers Cyan's name in complete shock, causing Cyan to casually greet him before a sudden commotion erupts on the structure above. Cyan watches the chaotic display, asking who that idiot is, and noting that he seems like the absolute opposite of his family members. Cyan locks eyes with an unseen observer, walking straight into a grand, ornate hall where servants await. The robed attendants bow deeply, politely welcoming young Master Cyan back to the estate. Cyan notes bitterly that these people never even glanced at him in the past, but a lot has clearly changed over the course of the year. Suddenly, a violent burst of pressure slams into the room, and Cyan immediately recognizes the chilling aura. Cyan shudders as a massive, suffocating pink energy radiates down from the upper balcony. A massive explosion of force rocks the hall, as Cyan braces himself against the sudden assault. A voice calls out from the smoke, noting that it has been a long time since they last met. Cyan's blonde older brother stands at the top of the stairs, mockingly asking if Cyan has completely forgotten his own family. The violent aura flares aggressively, completely shattering Cyan's composure. Wielding a glowing purple blade, the older brother slashes down with lethal intent. He tells Cyan he better get it together immediately if he has no desire to die right here. Cyan deflects the strike and formally greets his older brother, prompting the blonde youth to smile, glad that Cyan actually remembers his face. Cyan answers that it would be impossible to forget his own brother's face, keeping his weapon ready. The elite brother states that this realization makes him genuinely happy, mentioning he heard rumors that Cyan's swordsmanship had significantly improved. He brings up Cyan's exploits on the battlefield, looking down with absolute confidence. He declares that he is glad, while Cyan reminds himself that his brother is the type of monster who refuses to spare a single glance at anyone he deems useless. Knowing his brother is only paying attention because Cyan has proven his worth helps him calm his raging nerves, allowing Cyan to offer a fake smile and say he missed him too. Emily collapses onto the floor nearby, complaining loudly that the young master left her behind to carry absolutely all the baggage by herself. The older brother turns his sharp gaze to her, noting he heard she was close to Cyan, but surprises him by how comfortable she acts around a noble. Cyan steps between them, firmly asking Emily to leave him alone with his brother for a brief moment. Me! Cyan glares intensely at his sibling, warning him not to make him repeat himself. A dark, malicious entity within Cyan stirs, laughing that it was a perfect opportunity to completely take over his physical body. Cyan demands to know why the entity stopped him from escalating the fight right then and there. The dark spirit tells Cyan not to be mistaken, explaining it simply wants Cyan's inner rage to grow so that he becomes far more delicious to consume. Cyan smiles coldly, noting that such a vile desire is exactly like the entity, before walking down a long hallway toward a set of double doors. An informant enters the study, revealing to the older brother that he has successfully tracked down the second young lady as ordered. The informant reveals she is currently in the north, specifically within the territory of the White Elves, and is instructed to report back immediately if she attempts to return. Ashel's servant notices the older brother's bright expression, asking if his reunion with Cyan was highly amusing. The brother laughs out loud, admitting it could be described that way, but reveals a dark undercurrent. His smirk vanishes as he declares he is actually in a terrible mood, recalling how Cyan looked directly at him as if staring at a lifelong nemesis. Vowing to keep a incredibly close eye on his sibling, the blonde young master mutters Cyan's name, wondering what massive secrets he is actively hiding outside the courtyard. Emily calls out with deep disappointment that Cyan is leaving her behind. Cyan argues that it is not his fault. He is strictly required to take a formal night escort to the academy, but Emily fires back that he should have told her beforehand. Cyan bids her farewell and tells her to be good, rolling up the carriage windows as they officially begin their journey. Emily watches the carriage roll away into the distance, shouting at Cyan to take proper care of himself. Cyan looks out the window, remembering when he was 8 years old and completely abandoned, with absolutely no one around to take care of his failing health. Back then, it was Emily who carried him on her back through the streets, sprinting frantically to the nearest doctor to save his life. Cyan knows with complete absolute certainty that if it were not for her devotion, he would have been found dead in some abandoned corner of the mansion. He considers her someone he values infinitely, more than a mere servant or maid. Cyan looks closely at his guard, realizing that assigning 6 whole intermediate class knights just to escort one single person is highly suspicious. He prepares himself, knowing that dangerous trouble is bound to go down before he ever sets foot inside the academy. The carriage pulls over as the lead knight informs Cyan that they should set up camp for the night in the deep woods. Cyan agrees and steps out, immediately realizing there is absolutely no forest like this anywhere near their designated route. They are out in the absolute middle of nowhere, and the knights formally call for the young master to come forward. Cyan steps into the clearing, looking at the surrounding circle of warriors and demanding to know exactly who is behind this trap. The 6 intermediate class knights draw their weapons with cold, lethal expressions, but Cyan simply responds with a mocking smile. The knights are unsettled by his smile, prompting Cyan to repeat his question as the lead assassin declares that Cyan does not need to know since he is about to die anyway. The executioner mocks that he will be nice enough to make the kill as painless as possible, telling Cyan to just close his eyes. The knights lunge forward simultaneously with blinding speed, swinging their blades to sever the boy's head. A massive shockwave tears through the ground as Cyan instantly counters, moving with supernatural speed that leaves the knights gasping. An assassin is slammed brutally into the dirt, staring up in absolute horror as Cyan unleashes a massive, glowing pink blade of raw mana. Cyan stands completely untouched amidst the swirling magical energy, furiously demanding to know who the fuck is behind the ambush. Wielding his overwhelming power, Cyan blitzes the squad, asking if they seriously did not expect a high-level counterattack to happen. The seasoned knights are completely shredded by the kinetic force, groaning in agony as their formation is utterly annihilated. Pink explosions devastate the forest clearing, bringing the veteran soldiers directly to their knees. The lead knight clutches his wounds, screaming in absolute disbelief at how an 11-year-old child could possibly possess this monstrous level of strength. The assassins finally realized the terrifying weight behind his reputation, understanding there was a very real reason. Cyan came back alive after fighting a dragon. The broken commander weeps in terror, realizing this assassination mission was completely doomed from the absolute start. Cyan steps over the bleeding squad, pointing his glowing sword directly at the leader's throat and commanding him to tell him everything. The defeated knight breaks instantly, weeping on the dirt as he confesses that Mrs. Margaret was the one entirely behind the execution order. Cyan sighs that the fight was entirely too easy while the broken knight groans in absolute agony on the dirt. A horse charges down the path as Cyan reviews what he heard, locking eyes with the final survivor and realizing it was Brian who drove young Master Kranz before. Brian nervously addresses the young master, asking with complete dread if Cyan is actually going to kill him right here. Cyan notes that Brian does not even look all that sad about his impending fate, prompting Brian to admit they were the ones who tried to slaughter Cyan first. A panicked lord demands to know what the hell is going on, screaming that one knight is completely missing while the other 6 were found dead right as Cyan left the city 10 days ago. The noble holds his face in distress, realizing they completely underestimated Cyan and that someone must be pulling strings behind the scenes. But the blonde lord snaps that if they push further, Cyan will react. A cold voice asks if he wants his son to graduate in one piece, commanding everyone to do absolutely nothing because no one else must ever find out about this massive failure. Madame Margaret coldly orders her subordinates to completely eliminate anyone who knows a single detail about the failed strike, and her servant complies. 10 whole days pass since leaving Saffron, and Cyan rests comfortably in his quarters, reflecting on how Brian has been submissively acting as his personal subordinate all this time. Cyan walks down the road knowing his enemies are fully aware he is still alive, leaving him to contemplate exactly what he should do next with Brian. The sight of the grand fantasy city brings back old memories, and though Cyan cannot exactly call them good, he knows this academy changed him in many profound ways. As a noble descendant of the Duke Vert family, Cyan formally stands before the academy board to complete his official arrival registration. The administrator smugly confirms he is officially registered, telling him to wait in his assigned dormitory before attending the mandatory entrance ceremony and elemental test in 2 days. Cyan holds the heavy room key and drops a massive bag of belongings directly onto the floor, startling his companion. Brian stammers out in absolute shock as Cyan turns around and aggressively states that this single bag is all the luggage they had. Cyan notes that since they have safely made it to the academy and all the luggage is present, Brian's designated role is now completely done. Brian panics and begs Cyan to wait, looking completely bewildered as Cyan tosses a hefty pouch of currency straight at him. Cyan calmly explains that the money is more than enough to help Brian start a brand new life wherever he chooses to go. Instead of fleeing, Brian fiercely drops to his knees, slamming the floor as he roars a request for permission to serve Cyan for his entire life, leaving Cyan to ask if he truly considers himself a knight. Brian mentions a lesson his father used to tell him, but Cyan sighs heavily at the sheer foolishness of the display, leaving the young servant completely confused. Cyan darkly asks how Brian can be so sure that he won't betray him, but Brian stands firm and states, "It does not matter," prompting Cyan to skip the boring entrance ceremony and head straight to the elemental test. Powerful elite students gather inside the grand hall as the high-stakes elemental assessments officially begin. Magical circles erupt as Erin Severa steps forward, manifesting a luminous wave of energy that solidifies her rank with a 2-star mana tier and a massive 52% light element affinity. Seth Chahar Khan unleashes his own dynamic physical prowess, leaving the bearded dean to look through the student paperwork with surprise. Cyan steps into the center of the testing array as dark purple mana surges violently around him, recording a staggering 1-star mana rank, an S-tier physical grade, and a massive 92% dark element score. Dean Kundel Quizel marvels at the paperwork, noting that even the legendary Alice Vert, who is praised as a child of God, cannot match up to the raw potential of her younger brother, despite his element being darkness. A heavy impact echoes through the chambers, as instructors tensely discuss the massive political ramifications of Cyan Vert being assigned directly to the Royal Hall. The 5th Princess looks on with absolute intensity as the faculty worries that Cyan's presence will heavily accelerate the dangerous succession conflicts within the Empire. An instructor warns them not to overthink it, noting that the entire Empire will simply have to witness whether this anomalous child becomes a savior or brings forth absolute ruin. Cyan observes his 92% dark affinity score, thinking back to his past life, when a hostile voice suddenly asks if his high score is the result of drinking so much demonic beast blood. The arrogant bully steps forward, identified as Popper Panarin, the elite son of Marquis Panarin from the Garum Kingdom, who mockingly states he heard Cyan does not even know who his own mother is. Cyan smiles smugly, recognizing Popper as the exact same vile brat who relentlessly bullied him alongside Kranz in his past life, thinking how incredibly lucky he is to cross paths with him now. Kranz commands his lackeys to move so he can give Cyan a good beating, but he suddenly freezes in terror when he locks eyes with Cyan's terrifyingly cold glare. Popper gets clapped by Cyan's shoe to the ribcage, then cornering a trembling Kranz and asking if they should have a nice little chat. Cyan leans in close and coldly warns Kranz that he does not care what games are played behind his back, but if it happens again, Kranz will be graduating from this academy in a wheelchair. Leaving his enemies frozen in fear, Cyan navigates through the grand, sunlit corridors and enters the towering archive shelves of the massive academy library. High heels click softly against the floor as a mysterious observer watches Cyan from the shadows of the tall bookcases. A faculty member panics and tells Cyan he is not allowed in this restricted sector, but then calmly approaches Cyan and introduces herself. Cyan smiles subtly and slides the hidden object the instructor was looking for, but as she grabs the object, something catches Cyan off guard as the atmosphere shifts. A violent burst of purple mana rips through the aisle as Cyan exposes her true identity, addressing her as Sarika Nigrathi, the lethal hall master of the secret assassin organization known as MIST. Sarika draws her weapon in a flash of dark energy, furiously demanding to know how a mere student could possibly know her classified identity. Cyan remembers that in his past life, Instructor Sarika's first impression seemed entirely ordinary during their boring counseling sessions. Back then, Cyan assumed her talk of expecting growth from a bullied younger sibling was a mere joke, but Sarika locks eyes with him now and claims she is genuinely interested in him. She notes it is exceptionally rare to see a human with an 84% dark element score, explaining that humanity is simply ignorant about its boundless, infinite growth potential. Cyan steps back in confusion as the memory of the catastrophic crimson tide of mana flashes through his mind, wondering if this powerful assassin can actually help him alter the future. Cyan reminds himself not to fall for her innocent-looking facade, knowing full well that she is a lethal assassin hiding directly inside the continent's most elite royal academy. Sarika smirks and commands him to follow her back to her private research laboratory so they can continue their discussion in private. She gestures toward a mess on the floor and tells Cyan he can clean that up, leaving him to look around the eerie, magic-singed room. Cyan takes a sip of tea and smirks, bluntly telling her that she put poison in his cup, prompting Sarika to confidently reply that it is not a severe poison, so he should not worry. Cyan sets the cup down and coldly states that weak parlor tricks like this will never work on him, advising her to use something a bit stronger next time, as Sarika smiles intensely. Sarika demands to know exactly how he discovered her identity, and Cyan reveals he knows she receives her secret assassination orders hidden inside a specific, unpopular book in the library. Cyan reveals he knows the exact drop location, leading a smirking Sarika to ask if he is trying to claim that he is also a covert member of MIST. Cyan chuckles darkly before demanding to know exactly when her organization's highly secretive purification project is scheduled to begin. Cyan glares with piercing eyes, but Sarika plays dumb, offering a bright smile and claiming she has absolutely no idea what he is talking about. Cyan explicitly clarifies that he is referring to her calculated assassinations, prompting Sarika to unleash her aura and warn him that he will deeply regret those words. Cyan mockingly asks if she is seriously threatening a student right now, causing Sarika to dash forward with lethal intent to test his capabilities. Blades clash with rapid-fire speed as Cyan easily evades her strikes, stating he has already proven his identity more than enough. Sarika swings her blade in a fury, screaming that even if he is part of MIST, there is absolutely no way a hallmaster like her would not know about his existence. Vowing never to let him escape alive, Sarika presses the attack, forcing Cyan to unleash a sudden burst of brilliant pink mana. Cyan declares that if she refuses to believe his words, he will show her the truth, unleashing a massive shockwave from his blade. The colossal force shatters the room as Sarika gasps in absolute shock, immediately recognizing the legendary pink weapon in his hands. Wielding the demonic sword, "Karam!" Cyan asks if she finally believes him now, noting that MIST is currently searching desperately for the true successor. Cyan stands tall and commands her to immediately bring him to Aru, and the scene shifts to a dark, atmospheric street somewhere in Lewin. They step through a hidden portal under the cover of night, navigating past the ancient wooden lattice structures of a secret outpost. Sarika notes with surprise that Cyan is not even slightly shocked to find a hidden MIST base in a place like this, gesturing toward a massive stone archway that leads straight to the divine altar. They step into a massive, hidden dimension, forged entirely by the unique power of the god of fog, making the interior vastly larger than it appears from the outside. Cyan senses enemies instantly, tracking 2 threats at 4 o'clock and 3 more at 11 o'clock before drawing his blade to shred the oncoming wave. Cyan anticipated the ambush, spinning through the dark disciples and cutting them down with rapid, visceral steel. Energy crackles as Cyan completely obliterates their defenses, leaving his attackers screaming in agony as purple mana rips through their formation. A high-level disciple gasps in total disbelief that an 11-year-old child deflected his lethal dagger in a split second, prompting Cyan to instantly expand his secret technique. Unleashing the devastating Death Horn formation, Cyan sweeps the battlefield in a brilliant crimson surge of kinetic force. The hidden guards scream, as Cyan's bloodthirst wave manifests a terrifying skeletal visage, completely overwhelming the seasoned assassins. The defenders clutch their chests in agony, unable to withstand the crushing weight of the dark element technique. Sarika watches the carnage from the steps, completely enthralled as Cyan prepares his fog sword style, activating the unshakable roots of a great tree. Cyan blasts through the final defense line, prompting an excited Sarika to shout that he is adept at her main skills and that she can no longer hold back against him. Sarika charges down with massive momentum, unleashing her thick fog 8th form assault straight at Cyan's position. Steel clashes violently as Sarika laughs, noting that his proficiency with the fog sword styles makes her infinitely more interested in his true potential. Cyan focuses his gaze as he notes that an unyielding zeal for combat is exactly what drives Sarika to fight, until one of them dies. Cyan commands her to step back, but Sarika roars for him to come back, activating her, rushing Fogstorm to lock him down. A massive shockwave rocks the altar, and Cyan reminds himself that this entire realm was created directly by the god Eru. Realizing he can use absolutely any technique he wants in a pocket dimension like this, Cyan glares intensely, noting he might end up accidentally killing her, but decides it does not matter. A sudden impact halts the fight as a defeated figure collapses on the ground, leaving a shocked Sarika to stare in complete disbelief. The soul of the demonic sword suddenly materializes into her full human form, complaining that she did not want to intervene but demands to know what is up with this chaotic situation. Cyan stares down at the Hallmaster, reminding her that she is supposed to worship the god Eru, while Sarika argues she was simply checking to make sure Cyan was the true successor. The sword spirit. Karam flares her power, asking if Sarika's action should be taken as a direct challenge against her, but Sarika points out they should focus on the successor first. Karam suddenly stumbles as her physical form flickers, leaving Cyan to panic, while Sarika notes that manifesting a full physical form is an inefficient method that eats away at the owner's life force. Sarika proudly introduces herself as the Hallmaster of Mist, stepping forward as Karam whimpers in distress and begs Cyan to make the crazy woman let her go. Cyan confirms Karam is fine and commands her to just stay behind him, drawing his blade as Karam claims it would be an absolute honor. Cyan smirks and warns Sarika not to come crying and begging for his forgiveness later, prompting her to reply that she would love it if he could actually push her to that point. A colossal boom echoes through the chamber as a divine decree cuts off the squabble, strictly commanding them to send the successor directly to the altar. A magnificent, glowing blue portal opens in the center of the hall, and Cyan steps forward, ecstatic that he finally gets to meet Eru, the god of darkness. Cyan approaches the grand throne where the massive, cloaked deity resides, recalling how the common people always claim that the god of black fog is evil and kills without hesitation. In response to those claims, the deity asserts that his kills are simply what his targets desired, reminding Cyan that others do not get to decide what is right or wrong. Cyan knows that this god is actually just trying to protect the weak, stepping up the grand staircase as the divine entity asks if Cyan truly knows who stands before him. Arrow unleashes a staggering wall of pressure, but Cyan stands completely unfazed, confidently addressing him as Eru, the god of black fog. Eru gazes down from his throne, noting he has never seen Cyan before, and demands to know what concrete evidence he has to claim himself as the true successor. Cyan notes that Eru has surely already sensed it, as there are only two distinct ways to ever become the official successor of Mist. One way is if the god grants the Mist Stone personally, while the other occurs when the stone finds a qualified master on its own, leading Eru to deduce that the latter applies here. Eru notes, "It is entirely true that the Mist Stone which belonged on the altar mysteriously vanished into thin air last year." Eru admits, "It is highly surprising that Cyan managed to awaken Karam when even he couldn't track her down," staring into Cyan's eyes and realizing he is an outsider from an entirely separate timeline. Cyan is startled that the god explicitly knows he is from another timeline, while Eru notes that if Cyan wanted an all-knowing god, he came to the wrong place, leaving Cyan to realize he shouldn't have expected anything. Eru muses that this situation is actually quite convenient, since a perfect successor walked right in, leaving him with less work to do, causing Cyan to call him as lazy as ever. Eru points out that Cyan brought something rather annoying with him, But Cyan holds up his blade and states that if the world remains completely ignorant of this thing's existence, it will become useless. Enro chuckles that Cyan possesses quite the evil hobby, but stepping forward as his absolute master, he demands to know what the successor truly seeks to accomplish with this divine power. Cyan remembers being asked this exact same question in his past life, when his idiotic response was that he would live entirely for the sake of his brother. Enro objects to that past response, warning that there is absolutely nothing more dangerous than blind faith, leaving Cyan to realize the god likely foresaw his previous pathetic demise. Cyan looks the deity dead in the eye and firmly declares that this time he is going to use Aru's divine power purely for his own self-serving purposes. Eru darkly warns him to answer very carefully or he might kill him on the spot, but Cyan fires back that he does not care about the consequences of his actions. Cyan declares he will never follow anyone's orders ever again, prompting a satisfied Eru to note that the boy clearly has a firm plan, which Cyan casually denies. Eru decides it does not matter as long as Cyan purifies his name, shifting his focus to use his pink magical energy to forcefully summon his daughter. Karam is dragged into the open, screaming for the crazy old bastard to get away from her, while Eru playfully demands that she stay completely still. Cyan sarcastically praises their wholesome father-daughter relationship, right as a massive shockwave of energy forcefully bonds Karam back into Cyan's soul. Cyan realizes the binding did not drain a single drop of his own mana, while the flustered Karam aggressively points and screams at him for what he just did. The next morning at the student dorms, Brian walks into the main hall and stands completely frozen in absolute bewilderment. Brian stammers that this is not a situation he can just let be, staring at the unexpected early morning standoff developing in the young master's room. Karam lounges back and mockingly remarks on an instructor keeps visiting her students so early in the morning, warning that others will start gossiping about how special their relationship is. Sarika smoothly counters that it is all to guide him onto the right path, prompting a sharp retort from Karam about whether a hallmaster should be a bit more careful. As the argument flares, Karam aggressively snaps that it doesn't matter what she does because her owner only needs her, leaving Cyan to completely ignore their comical bickering and slide out for a quiet walk. As Karam demands a fight inside the dorm, Cyan escapes the chaotic bickering and steps out into the town square to clear his head. Cyan sits on a roof hoping to finally relax, but his heightened senses immediately catch the thick, unmistakable smell of blood in the air. A helpless student falls to the ground in agony as a group of elite nobles corners them in a hidden alleyway. Magic flashes through the shadows as a vicious noble torments the kneeling commoner by forcing a lethal item down their throat. The noble taunts the student while handling a volatile mana marble, preparing to force-feed them a little snack. Barrett prepares to unleash his magic, entirely unbothered by her high and mighty status. The arrogant noble scoffs upon realizing her identity, mocking her for simply being the failure fifth princess of the Yushif Empire. Barrett feigns a greeting by stating, "It is an honor to meet her," though his eyes remain completely filled with malice. Aaron refuses to shake his hand, demanding a full explanation for the horrific situation happening on the ground. Barrett gasps in false surprise, claiming it is all a huge misunderstanding before grabbing the victim by the hair. He forces the trembling commoner to speak up, asking if they are actually being bullied, only for the terrified student to beg Aaron to just leave them alone. Barrett laughs gleefully at the response, but as he reaches out to drag the princess away, an overwhelming force suddenly cuts through the air. Cyan steps into the alleyway with a terrifyingly cold expression, stating that Barrett clearly did not understand Leximus's plea to be left alone. With blinding speed, Cyan lunges forward and rams his fist straight into Barrett's jaw, leaving the elite noble squad completely shell-shocked. Aaron stammers Cyan's name in disbelief, while Cyan looks down at the bleeding target and confirms that this pathetic kid is indeed Leximus. Cyan's mind flashes back to his past life, remembering the brutal history of the Klein Fortress where an absolute monster wielded the blade. In that previous timeline, Leximus Klein eventually grew to become the continent's best swordsman, abandoning her home country after graduating from the academy. She had completely renounced her nationality, leaving a trail of shattered steel and broken formations in her wake. She had mastered the absolute peak of swordsmanship without utilizing a single drop of mana, severing entire defensive lines in open combat. Back then, Cyan had received direct cold orders to assassinate her, tracking her movements through chaotic war zones. There was no personal hatred or special reason behind the execution contract. It was simply a mission given to a shadow. He remembers standing over her battered body, catching his breath as she lay defeated on the ruined pavement. He had truly respected her for reaching such divine heights through pure physical mastery, which is why he hated the thought of a stealthy assassination. In the present, Barrett stumbles back to his feet, coughing up blood as his lackeys panically ask if he is all right. Cyan glares at them, knowing that forcing someone to swallow a mana marble is an incredibly hazardous game that leads to the total destruction of internal mana channels. Cyan looks at the three trembling nobles and casually states that he wants to join their little game, holding the glowing marble in his hand. Before Barrett can even blink, Cyan pins him down, flares his terrifying dark aura, and coldly commands him to open his mouth. The scene transitions to the Academy Infirmary later that day, where the afternoon sun shines calmly through the large glass windows. A medical attendant stands over Leximus, strictly ordering her to remain on complete bed rest so her internal injuries can heal. Aaron smiles gently, praising Cyan for scaring those bastards away, while Cyan looks over the medical charts noting a slight concussion and multiple fractures. Leximus looks up nervously and asks Cyan if he perhaps knows her from somewhere, but Cyan deflects, claiming he thought he did but was mistaken. Aaron asks where her dormitory is located, and Leximus looks down in embarrassment, admitting she stays in the commoner hall. She explains she was only specially enrolled thanks to Instructor Veltane's promise of financial support, meaning she has absolutely no political backing. Cyan immediately looks at Aaron and suggests that the princess should just take Leximus in as her own personal follower. Leximus gasps in absolute shock as Cyan casually points out that she is a girl, leaving Aaron completely stunned. Leximus immediately drops to her knees to apologize, explaining that short hair and boys' clothes were simply far more comfortable for her. Aaron forgives her instantly, agreeing that Cyan's idea is wonderful and offering to shield her so she can live a comfortable life without facing any more bullies. Tears well up in Leximus's eyes as she fiercely promises to grow into someone the princess can be genuinely proud of. Aaron tells her there is no need to thank her since it was all Cyan's idea, but Cyan simply walks out the door, noting that he has already done more than enough. Cyan reflects on how Leximus never would have lost her mana or abandoned the Empire if it had not been for Barrett's cruelty in the past life. He knows that with her full potential intact, she will grow into someone incredibly difficult for even him to defeat, but his focus must turn elsewhere. Cyan reviews the classified purification mission he received from Sarika that morning, officially accepting the quest tracking system. As Cyan walks through the main courtyard, a massive shadow suddenly blocks his path, radiating an intense combat pressure. Students panic in the background, screaming that a massive demonic beast has somehow broken into the academy grounds. The towering figure ignores the chaos, looking directly at Cyan and asking if he is indeed the famous Cyan Vert. The muscle-bound youth proudly introduces himself as Seth Shaharkin, a fellow freshman who cannot believe an 11-year-old kid possesses an S-rank physique. Seth flexes aggressively, shouting that he heard all about Cyan surviving a dragon attack, but is furious because even he did not receive an S rank for his physique. Seth roars at the top of his lungs, pointing at Cyan and aggressively demanding an immediate fight to settle the score. Cyan notices a distinct mark on his chest, realizing the rumors about the Prince of the Sand enrolling in the academy were entirely true. Seth stems from Sparnia, a powerful desert nation to the east led by a legendary genius prince, though Cyan remembers that the kingdom eventually fell to absolute ruin. Cyan notes that he never met the Sand Prince like this in his previous life, remembering that Seth eventually neglected his health in pursuit of pure muscle growth. Seth demands they decide who is the best right here and now, but Cyan bluntly declines, stating that unpermitted duels are strictly forbidden on campus. Cyan tricks him by stating they must submit an official request on the 3rd floor of the main hall, sending a fired-up Seth sprinting away to find the office. Cyan sighs as the loud prince leaves, confirming the rumors that Seth's brain is made entirely of muscles before refocusing his mind on his actual target. The scene transitions to the dark streets of the city, where a shadowy transaction is currently being finalized. A wealthy noble named Zickerman Albus barks orders at his men to stop loitering and deliver a payload to the clients immediately. Known publicly As a kind philanthropist who donates heavily to charity, Zykerman secretly runs the continent's most brutal multi-species breeding programs and slave markets. Zykerman proudly boasts that today marks the appearance of his life's absolute masterpiece, entirely unaware that Cyan is watching him from the shadows. Cyan draws his glowing purple blade, sensing an incredibly complex and strange energy radiating from deep within the compound vaults. Zykerman chuckles darkly over his blood-stained floors, whispering for his cash cow to sleep well before thick smoke suddenly fills the corridor. Cyan crashes to the doors with rapid steel, leveling the guards as a panicked Zykerman screams for his men to catch the intruder. Cyan spins through the defense line with rapid-fire strikes, unleashing visceral waves of pink mana that tear the defenders apart. The elite mercenary force is completely shredded by the kinetic momentum, leaving Zykerman to curse in absolute horror. Cyan steps over the pile of unconscious guards, mockingly noting that the wealthy lord certainly employed a whole ton of useless people. Zykerman backs away into a corner, aggressively demanding to know if the assassin simply wants money. Cyan corners him without a word, his dark cloak billowing as he prepares to execute the final judgment. Cyan addresses Zykerman, Albus by name, listing his inhumane experiments and stating that his impending death is thoroughly deserved. Cyan commands him to repent for his sins so his pain can vanish, but the corrupt noble deflects, claiming he is just selling slaves to make ends meet because market demands exist. Zykerman screams to ask what he did that was so bad, prompting a cold Cyan to note he never expected a monster like him to show any real remorse. Thank you for watching Buff Goblin. Cyan unleashes his thick fog 9th form assault, shredding the slaver in a violent spray of crimson and pink magical lacerations. With the purification mission complete, Cyan decides to explore the deep vaults before leaving, instantly sensing a massive spike in energy nearby. He blows open a hidden door to find an unconscious human girl lying next to a massive, glowing, purple dragon egg. Cyan approaches the artifact in shock, wondering who could possibly pick something so highly dangerous off the street. He realizes Zykerman was planning to sell the egg, leaving Karam to panic over the catastrophic danger if the creature actually hatches. Cyan notes that dragons are massive reservoirs of elemental mana, meaning the egg shouldn't be able to hatch without continuous imbuement from its mother. Suddenly, a loud crack echoes through the chamber as a deep fracture rapidly splits across the glowing surface. The shell explodes violently, unleashing a massive burst of elemental pressure that catches Cyan completely off guard. The fragments shatter across the floor as a strange cry echoes from the center of the ruined nest. A young girl with long pink hair and distinct dragon features emerges, staring directly up at the young master. Karam panics in total disbelief, pointing out that this creature is a legendary draconic human hybrid bred in secret. The newborn child stands up from the cloth, locking her eyes straight on to the young warrior. The child smiles brightly and loudly calls out to Cyan, calling him Papa and leaving him completely frozen in absolute shock. Karam bursts into hysterical laughter, mockingly congratulating Cyan on becoming an 11-year-old dad, while a furious Cyan roars that this is all her fault. Cyan examines the broken scales, remembering how Karam confidently swore she had never seen a dragon egg hatch after losing its mother. Karam nervously laughs it off, claiming she simply never expected to see a miracle like this actually happen. Cyan looks down at the resting hybrid child, knowing that her mere existence poses an immediate, fatal threat to everyone involved. If the Academy or the strict dragon clans ever discover her, it will trigger an absolute catastrophe across the continent. Cyan hesitates, heavily weighing the immense danger of keeping her alive against the dark path of ending her life right now. He tells himself, it might be better to send her off peacefully now, rather than forcing her to live a lifetime of misery as a hunted freak. Cyan draws his blade with a cold look, stepping closer to the sleeping girl to deliver a swift end. The child suddenly opens her eyes and sweetly calls out to him again, reaching her tiny hands up toward his face. Cyan pauses as he picks her up, stunned by a sudden wave of unfamiliar emotion as he notes how incredibly warm her body feels. The child hugs him tightly, entirely melting his cold assassin exterior and shattering his homicidal intent. Cyan sheathes his steel and sighs, telling Karam they will just have to raise her and make things work out somehow, leaving Karam to wonder if she will become his servant. Meanwhile, A massive political storm erupts back at the Grand Vert Castle as the high noble lords discover that their ambush failed. Cyan's brother confronts his distressed mother, confidently telling her to report any struggles to him before heading off to receive a classified briefing. The elite brother commands his informant to report, learning that 6 of their knights were found slaughtered in the mountains and that Madame Margaret was the true orchestrator. The informant adds that the youngest son was successfully placed into the royal hall, prompting the older brother to claim he already knew all this. He states, "Their lord never keeps around subordinates who disappoint him, vowing that he cannot afford to lose his premier position after all his hard work." The brother dispatches an operative to infiltration the academy personally, commanding them to discover exactly what massive secrets Cyan is actively hiding. The spy accepts the direct order with a firm salute, disappearing into the long castle corridors to begin the tracking mission. Back at the academy dorms, Sarika drops by Cyan's room and freezes in absolute shock, demanding to know why there is a random baby inside his quarters. Cyan sighs heavily, stating it is an incredibly long story, before his guest reveals. Cyan has caused massive trouble by accepting an official duel request. The guest barks to ask if Cyan is insane, but Cyan casually shrugs it off, knowing this muscle-brained prince is no ordinary 11-year-old child. Just 2 hours later, Cyan stands inside the grand outdoor arena as massive blue barrier runes flare to seal the perimeter. Seth Chaharkin draws his weapon with an intense grin, shouting that he has been eagerly waiting for this exact moment to test Cyan's S-rank physique. Seth notes he wanted a pure physical brawl, but since the academy limits them to swordsmanship and magic, he promises not to use spells if Cyan agrees to keep it to raw blades. Seth lunges forward with a massive shockwave, moving with incredible speed despite his colossal body size as Cyan tracks the incoming slash. Blades clash with a deafening boom as Cyan easily deflects the weighty downward strike, creating a massive shower of sparks. Cyan notes that against a powerhouse like Seth, a warrior does not need raw strength, but absolute acuity and preciseness. Cyan counters instantly with rapid-fire twin steel, executing a precise deflection that uses the prince's own momentum against him. Seth gasps in shock as he feels his heavy downward strike twisted away by a subtle, razor-sharp parry. Cyan spins to his blind spot with visceral momentum, slamming a heavy impact into Seth's guard. Seth is thrown completely off balance, desperately wondering if this kid has eyes on the back of his head, as Cyan's blade strips the weapon straight from his grip. Seth stumbles back completely unarmed as Cyan holds his ground, completing a masterclass performance in pure swordsmanship. A massive boom rocks the stage as Seth grins wildly, completely thrilled by Cyan's lightning-fast counterattack. The crowd gasps in sheer bewilderment, whispering to ask if Cyan is even a human, while an exhausted Seth catches his breath on one knee. Seth bursts into a proud laugh, openly admitting that he completely loses when it comes to pure swordsmanship. Cyan sheathes his practice blade, assuming the match is entirely over now that the physical phase is settled. Suddenly, a massive surge of elemental energy erupts from Seth's body as he roars Cyan's name, preparing to trigger the magic round. High in the VIP box, the bearded dean watches the arena, chuckling softly at how incredibly bold these freshman children are. Sarika notes that Cyan clearly won the sword duel, but reminds everyone that Seth possesses an exceptional 4-star tier magic capability. The faculty muses that the physical result was entirely obvious given their original ranks, wondering exactly what Cyan will do now that the spells are flying. Seth unleashes a staggering sand aura, while Sarika screams internally that Cyan is simply begging for people to pay attention to his skills. Seth activates his devastating Death Fist technique, unleashing a massive, crackling electrical punch straight at Cyan's position. Cyan is forced onto the defensive as a colossal explosion of elemental force completely obliterates the arena pavement. Seth leaps through the dust cloud, roaring that he won't let Cyan escape this time as he channels his destructive desert magic. Activating the lethal Desert Tooth spell, Seth conjures a violent wave of jagged earth spikes to impale the young master. Cyan shifts his stance and blurs across the terrain, dodging the massive kinetic bursts with fluid precision. Cyan notes that based on the sheer scale of the assault, Seth is easily capable of wielding high-level 4-star magic, leaving the barrier instructor struggling to maintain the protective seal. Seth barks in frustration, demanding to know how long Cyan intends to keep running around. But Cyan calmly asks if Seth expected him to just take the massive tracking attacks head-on. Cyan fixes him with a cold glare, bluntly dismissing the roaring prince by reminding him that he is acting like a mere child. A massive sandstorm spell erupts across the battlefield as a combatant screams out in pure distress. The veteran Dean watches closely as shocked onlookers realize that Seth has shattered expectations by unleashing a high-level 4-star spell, despite only being ranked at 3 stars. The overwhelming golden energy attack streaks forward as Seth shouts that this next strike is completely impossible to dodge. Cyan Vert stands completely unfazed on a high vantage point, calmly deciding to take the massive incoming magical assault completely head-on. After weathering the blast, Cyan handles a potion jar and notes with a confident smirk that the liquid temperature is absolutely perfect. He casually remembers how annoying it used to be, taking care of his younger siblings before calling out loudly to the princess. Onlookers gasp in utter shock as they notice just how rapidly the small child has grown up in such a short amount of time. A massive wave of blue magical energy slashes through the air with a deafening boom. The crowd gathers around a swirling blue vortex, completely terrified and wondering what could possibly be happening inside the barrier as another impact rocks the area. Mages desperately shout to reinforce the protected barrier before it breaks down completely, while Cyan wonders why the Dean is just watching without stopping such a dangerous duel. Instructors urge the Dean to halt the match immediately, but the Dean stares intensely at the field, sensing that something truly unprecedented is unfolding. Cyan expands his secret technique, prompting the horrified crowd to scream for him to stop, as a massive surge of dangerous void energy threatens to consume everything. Purple and blue streaks of raw magic radiate outward as the two powerful forces collide in a devastating magical confrontation. The Dean laughs out loud, admitting that Cyan continues to surprise him again and again in this fight as the residual energy swirls around them. Runes flash as Cyan deploys his specialized spatial magic, weaving the dark energy to completely swallow the opposing elements. A combatant exhales heavily in total disbelief as observers realize that the opposing high-level spell has suddenly and completely vanished from the arena. Students whisper in the corridors that they have never heard of a black sphere, magic capable of absorbing an entire spell, leaving them to wonder what kind of monster Cyan truly is as his hand crackles with purple energy. Cyan walks down the stone incline and coldly asks his opponent if he wishes to keep fighting, leaving the challenger panting and heavily out of breath. The defeated challenger collapses to his knees on the raised platform and openly admits complete defeat. The challenger falls into a deep depression over losing in both swordsmanship and magic, while Cyan looks down thoughtfully, wondering if he beat the guy a bit too one-sidedly. Another explosion rocks the area as a fierce warrior declares that he is thrilled by the outcome, because he was completely tired of fighting weaklings anyway. Extending a hand packed with residual force, the rival states that they must fight again sometime in the near future. The fierce warrior demands to know if Cyan will accept his next challenge, but Cyan flatly rejects the offer and turns away. Cyan looks closely at the young girl, noting that while he understands how fast dragon hybrids grow, she already looks like an advanced 6-year-old. The adopted girl floats forward with a bright smile to welcome her papa back, prompting Cyan to cross his arms and marvel at the insane growth rate of a dragon-human hybrid. Cyan worries that hiding her existence is going to become impossible if she keeps growing this fast, while a companion warns him that it will be especially tough if he keeps going wild like he did today. Sarika offers to help hide the demonic sword, but looks Cyan dead in the eye to demand what the hell he was thinking by causing such a massive scene. Sarika repeats the stern warning, emphasizing that going wild in public makes hiding their secrets completely unmanageable. Sarika points out that whatever Cyan picks up during a high-stakes mission is entirely his own business to deal with. Sarika warns that something of this magnitude will be incredibly hard to handle, officially putting Brian in charge of taking care of the young girl. Cyan receives an official red envelope with a gold seal, holding his blade as he mutters that this is a rather disappointing reward for winning a high-profile duel. Cyan locks his eyes forward, and Sarika reminds him that absolutely nothing good comes from attracting too much attention. Cyan reads the notice and realizes the dean is threatening to kick them out for misbehavior, throwing little Nana into a total panic as she cries out, wondering if they are going to end up living on the streets. Cyan looks down at the distressed child and asks where she even learned such dramatic phrases, before assuring her that she does not need to worry about a single thing. Brian asks anxiously if things will truly be all right if they are forced back, but Cyan tells him to relax because he realizes the warning letter came directly from the dean himself rather than the administration office. The dean stands tall and demands if Cyan truly wishes to enter the Knights of Light just to live for the sake of his brother, while Cyan stands firmly alongside a companion and confirms his choice. With intense focus in his eyes, Cyan listens as the dean laughs and offers some cynical advice regarding the path he is choosing. The dean looks forward sternly and states that absolutely nothing good will come from taking this path, warning that Cyan will face brutal trials and a cruel fate without gaining a single benefit. The dean barks that living this way is no different than existing as someone else's hollow doll, and that no matter the final result, Cyan will just end up blaming his brother. Cyan, steal. His expression, remembering that these exact chilling words were spoken to him by the dean in his past life, before his attendants interrupt his thoughts to suggest giving the young child a proper name. Cyan casually suggests the name Nana, causing his attendants to blink in utter confusion. The young girl beams with absolute joy, realizing that the name Nana is perfectly spelled the exact same way backwards. The scene shifts to the grand, opulent office of the Royal Academy Dean, where an official brush is put to paper. Dean Kundal Quisel mutters Cyan Vert's name, admitting to himself that he always knew the young boy possessed an immense amount of hidden potential. The dean ponders how a mere 1-star black sphere could completely absorb an advanced 4-star spell, staring intensely into the empty room. The dean narrows his eyes as he recalls that Cyan did not look like he exerted any effort at all during the feat, declaring that he wants to find the boy's absolute limits. The massive double doors of the office loom shut as the legendary name of Kundal Quisel echoes through the academy halls. As the academy's elite gather, it is noted that Quisel personally educated the current emperor and stands as one of the very few legendary 9-star mages on the entire continent. Following the tragic death of the empress, Quisel threw himself entirely into educating the academy students, and now he stands determined to uncover the truth behind Cyan's anomalous power. Cyan sharpens his gaze and moves like a flash, unleashing a devastating physical strike that shatters the surrounding air with a loud boom. Cyan smirks as he steps through the structural damage, noting that the old man's testing personality has not changed one bit from his past life. Standing inside the brightly lit chamber, Cyan realizes the dean knew exactly when he would arrive, confidently welcoming the incoming challenge. Looking up at the bright doorway, Cyan turns his back to the light and resolves to take this forced test head-on. The bearded dean glares with intense focus, demanding to see what the arrogant young master will do next. Cyan maneuvers through the air with incredible speed, catching the legendary 9-star mage completely off guard and leaving him wide-eyed with shock. Cyan crashes dynamically through the structural layout of the grand office, confronting Dean Kundal directly. Cyan introduces himself boldly as an incoming student, announcing that he has arrived to express his complete disagreement with the disciplinary complaint. The dean extends his hand to acknowledge the bold entrance, while Cyan points out that after bypassing the massive barrier outside, he became certain of one crucial detail. Cyan references the official letter bearing Kandal Chiogle's name, exposing the fact that the warning letter was nothing more than an excuse. Cyan looks the old man dead in the eye and asks if this entire theatrical display was just a hidden test of his talent, which the dean flatly confirms. The dean stands firm and states that he refuses to take back the official warning, challenging Cyan to try and persuade him otherwise. Cyan narrows his eyes and delivers a sharp interrogation, demanding to know if the dean desires the rapid expansion of the empire or simple honor for his family line. The dean scoffs at the bold question and flippantly claims that neither option concerns him, prompting Cyan to press further regarding what happens after the death of Emperor Dion. Cyan asks if the dean intends to remain completely neutral during the succession, causing the old man to grow furious and bark that Cyan is not just bold, but utterly arrogant. Cyan looks down as he internally reflects on being treated like a mere doll for Ashel, recalling the bloody historical throne succession fight from his past life. He remembers that Luenel was a cruel, vicious man who slaughtered all of his own siblings and who framed Kundal as a traitor before chaining him to a stone wall for execution. Cyan recalls how Kungdo worked tirelessly to brighten the future of another, only to be brutally betrayed, a realization that leaves the dean completely stunned in the present. The silver-haired dean barks that this is absolute nonsense, demanding to know how Cyan could possibly think the peace of the last century could fall so easily. Cyan stands his ground and asks if the dean truly believes that peace will last, exposing the fact that the Nepellus household is notoriously greedy for power. Cyan warns that the greedy household will resort to absolutely anything to keep their position, and that the day of their peaceful era falling is fast approaching. The dean stares downward in complete shock, wondering how an 11-year-old child could possess such a profound thought process, before asking why Cyan is revealing this information. Cyan smiles confidently and states that he has come to negotiate, offering his direct assistance in exchange for the dean pulling back the official warning. A low chuckle echoes through the room before the dean suddenly unleashes an aggressive magical shockwave that catches Cyan completely off guard. The dean glares fiercely through the dust, demanding to know what actual power a child has to help him, telling Cyan to feel the true weight of his arrogance. The legendary mage invokes his ultimate Chains of Judgment spell, but Cyan stares right through the binding magic and asks if the dean truly wants to fight him. Blades flash, and magic collides with a massive boom, as Cyan immediately retaliates against the high-level restriction. Cyan maneuvers fluidly through the explosive energy streaks, repeating his challenge to the dean with total confidence. The dean commands the glowing orange energy lines to tighten, declaring that absolutely no one can escape his 9-star chain tower spell. The dean claims he must have heavily overestimated the boy's skills, prompting Cyan to flare his own energy aura and offer to prove his true capabilities. The dean gasps in pure shock as Cyan immediately deploys an advanced variation of his Void Sphere technique directly against the chains. The purple spatial magic expands violently, creating a massive localized impact that completely ruptures the 9-star binding spell. The dean recoils in absolute amazement, his eyes wide as he internally questions just how insanely talented this young boy truly is. The magical dust settles from the fierce clash, and Cyan turns back to casually ask the old man if he has proven himself useful enough now. The stunned dean yields and agrees to take back the warning letter, asking if that is truly all Cyan wants, which the boy calmly confirms. Cyan states that he simply does not want to watch the academy collapse a second time, before heading into the Sunset Market to buy a massive bundle of sweets for the kid waiting at home. Cyans! Servant Brian walks down the quiet streets, noting with a serious expression that the entire area feels strangely and unnaturally quiet. He pauses in a narrow alleyway, wondering if he is just making a big deal out of nothing before a shadowy presence prompts him to command the hidden figures to come out. Brian gasps in recognition as his bundle of provisions and fresh bread are violently scattered across the stone pavement. Meanwhile, Cyan relaxes at his desk, reflecting on how he agreed to attend classes after his deal with the dean, but finds himself completely and utterly bored out of his mind. He complains about reviewing material he mastered 30 years ago, deciding that since there are no active missions, he might as well go train. A classmate blocks his path, pointing out that lessons are not over, while Cyan tries to excuse himself to the bathroom, only to be called a liar. Erin's servant complains that Princess Erin isn't acting like a princess. Erin demands to know why Cyan still calls her Your Highness. Cyan just explains he's Hua Sivian. How could he call her by name? The conversation takes a sharp turn as a silver-haired noble looks up in absolute shock at an unexpected arrival. Cyan steps onto the grand staircase, casually calling out a greeting to an old acquaintance after a long time apart. Arrogant, high-ranking students named Pavian and Nerovian look down in complete disgust, demanding to know why royals are hanging around peasants and servants. Cyan notes that these attackers belong to the notoriously greedy Nepellus family, and make it explicitly clear that they absolutely despise the princess. The surrounding nobles quickly recognize Cyan, prompting him to introduce himself smoothly as the youngest son of the prestigious Vert household. Nerovian turns a cold, vicious smirk back toward the princess, bluntly stating that she is completely excluded from this circle. He grabs her roughly and warns her to know her place, telling her she needs to be far more self-aware of her low standing. Cyan watches the toxic interaction from the shadows, stepping forward to coldly remark that their behavior makes them look far worse off than total strangers. Cyan states that blood and water are completely meaningless in the face of raw power, declaring his words over a vision of fallen skulls. The toxic nobles are left stunned, while attendants rush over in a panic to check if the shaken princess is all right. Back at the residence, Cyan calls out into an empty room, prompting a massive pink demonic entity to manifest and complain about not getting a single break around here. Cyan demands to know why the entity is hiding in that convenient form, before sternly pointing forward and ordering it to go look for Brian. The entity rages about being treated like a common dog, but suddenly stops to sniff the air, detecting the faint, metallic scent of fresh blood nearby. Cyan flinches in shock before tracking the scent to a dark warehouse, where a battered guardian knight lies groaning on the floor surrounded by hostile mercenaries. A smug noble steps forward, mocking the fallen knight for not listening to them while they were still being nice, and laughing about how annoying he made things for them. The attacker states that this brutal beating is entirely because the knight's master chose to act up in his face, causing the fallen guardian to glare back with pure defiance. The noble smiles menacingly down at the broken knight, mocking his injuries and asking if he has completely lost his mind from the beating. The hostile leader points down coldly and delivers a ruthless command to kill the guardian knight on the spot. A dark, cloaked figure suddenly emerges from the shadows of the warehouse, instantly identifying the mastermind behind this ambush as Barrett Lewismill. The battered knight gasps out for his young master, while Cyan looks over the damage and notes that his subordinate's vocal cords are heavily injured. Barrett laughs maniacally at Cyan's arrival, boasting that the boy has walked straight into the tiger's den and declaring that he will start by carving out Cyan's organs. Cyan responds that the challenge is exciting, instantly drawing his blade and unleashing a visceral, rapid-fire crimson slash that tears through the first wave of attackers. Bright, magical energy erupts through the warehouse as Cyan blitzes the mercenary ranks, leaving them screaming in agony as they are cut down in a flash. Barrett recoils in sheer terror, completely unable to comprehend how a single student could possess such monstrous, overwhelming strength. A blinding flash of magenta energy tears across the room, driving Barrett into a desperate rage as he screams Cyanvert's name and vows to kill him. An attacker tries to launch a fire spell, but is instantly silenced with a heavy strike as Cyan swings his blade through the dust with absolute precision. Barrett collapses heavily to the ground, panting and completely exhausted, yet he still managed to smugly ask what his sadistic hobbies have to do with Cyan. Barrett is known as the oldest son of the authoritative Lewismill household, notorious for physically assaulting others and burning small animals alive for his own sick entertainment. In the past timeline, Barrett completely crossed the line by murdering a female classmate, which ultimately triggered an official assassination order from Mist to purify him. Cyan recalls infiltrating Barrett's mansion in his past life and discovering countless corpses stored in the basement, remembering how the sadist smiled and welcomed death because he had already experienced all the fun he wanted. Staring down at the broken noble, Cyan realizes that simply executing him is nowhere near enough punishment for the atrocities he has committed. Cyan strikes brutally, breaking Barrett's composure and causing the arrogant noble to recoil in pure screaming distress. Cyan spins through the remaining guard forces, coldly stating that Barrett talks far too much and should never have laid his dirty hands on his loyal subordinate. Barrett screams in absolute agony as a massive surge of dark purple magic erupts, completely crushing his physical frame. A hidden spy hiding in the rafters gasps, realizing he must immediately notify young Master Ashel about Cyan's hidden powers before it completely ruins their grand plans. Before the spy can move, Cyan materializes directly behind him, exposing him as the obsessive little stalker who has been following his disciple everywhere. The spy chokes out a painful apology as Cyan brings him to his knees with a crushing physical grip. Cyan turns back to his battered guardian knight and sternly asks why he engaged in a fight he was guaranteed to lose, questioning if this was his idea of loyalty. Cyan demands to know why Brian did not simply run away, bluntly stating that he has absolutely no use for a loyal subordinate who goes and dies on him. Brian sits against the wall, taking the harsh lecture quietly before Cyan calls out into the empty room for Hallmaster Sarika to finally step out. The hooded figure emerges from the gloom, surprised at being detected, while Cyan points out that it is impossible to miss someone who brought their entire squad along. The master drops a captured agent at Cyan's feet as a gift, revealing that this is the actual operative who has been tracking Cyan's movements lately. The assassin master openly admits that Cyan possesses raw talent and power that completely surpasses a standard mist assassin, wielding a blade dripping with dark energy. Cyan listens as the master labels him an ideal successor, but warns that these high-profile incidents cannot continue. Cyan promises to be careful moving forward, but firmly declares that he has absolutely no intention of living like an idiot who takes shit from others. The master smiles at the boy's fierce protective nature over his own people, before waving a hand to depart and promising to clean up the rest of Barrett's remaining minions. The bound spy trembles, panicking over what Cyan intends to do to him, while Cyan smiles coldly and states that simply killing him would be far too easy. Cyan commands the spy to never question him, exposing the fact that he already knows the man is secretly Ashel's #1 subordinate. Cyan stares forward, remembering how this exact man used to be intensely jealous of his close relationship with Ashel during their previous timeline. Looking down at the terrified mole, Cyan decides that instead of execution, the man's deep internal connections will be far more useful for his long-term plans. The spy screams in terror to get away from him, as Cyan invokes his high-level dark element magic. Shadow personality. A violent explosion of dark purple energy swallows the spy entirely, forcefully rewriting his subconscious mind to bind his absolute loyalty to Cyan. The target shriek out one last time before the mind-altering spell locks into place, cementing Cyan's total control. The scene shifts back to the training grounds where a powerful warrior lunges forward with a sword, laughing arrogantly that the assault is nothing. Blades clash violently with a sharp ring as Leximus claims total victory over the princess during their private match. The princess catches her breath and admits she cannot win against him, softly reminding her guardian knight to call her by her proper name when they are completely alone. Cyan watches the training session from afar, noting that the combatants are pushing themselves incredibly hard as a heavy blow connects with a loud grunt. Another heavy strike rocks the courtyard, sending a trainee crashing into the dirt. Cyan observes the martial form and acknowledges the fighter's strength, while a determined Brian pet heavily and insists to his young master that he can keep going. Cyan watches the intense practice, reminding himself that there is absolutely no guarantee a dangerous incident like the one with Barrett won't happen again. Magical explosions and purple energy slashes rip through the training arena as the knights push their limits. Cyan reflects on the terrifying properties of his 9-star dark element magic, shadow personality, which manipulates an opponent by creating an entirely new persona directly from their own shadow. Cyan confronts his newly enslaved operative, demanding his name, prompting the hollow-eyed Kellen Diego to immediately confess that his original order was to spy on young Master Cyan. Cyan notes that his captive is completely submissive now before asking who the original owner is that he serves, forcing a completely rewritten Kellen Diego to confess that he used to serve young Master Ashel, but now wishes to pledge his absolute allegiance to Cyan. Cyan orders him to listen very closely to everything he has to say and relay it directly back to Ashel and Velius, flashing a menacing smile as he demands that not a single detail be left out. Kellen completely acknowledges the absolute order while Cyan's intense gaze locks onto the path ahead. Later on, the training grounds, Princess Erin approaches Cyan to ask if he came out to train alongside his guardian knight, prompting Cyan to wonder silently if she is secretly referencing the brutal incident that unfolded with Barrett a week ago. It is revealed that Barrett Lewismill was discovered collapsed right in front of the nurse's office, completely out of his mind, unable to utter a single word about who broke him and permanently stripped of his ability to ever use magic again. Cyan watches the training field, noticing that Leximus's expected harsh reaction is not what he had anticipated at all, because he honestly believed the princess would feel immensely happy about Barrett's sudden downfall. Suddenly, Brian breaks the quiet atmosphere by pointing out into the open sky in an absolute panic. Cyan panics instantly, remembering that he explicitly left Nana under Karam's watch. The surrounding trainees look up in complete confusion as little Nana appears out of thin air. Nana lunges forward with a bright shout for her papa, completely freezing the entire crowd as the princess gasps out in absolute, jaw-dropping shock. Cyan sighs heavily in an ocean of question marks, wondering how she managed to track him all the way to the Academy street grounds. Brian panics immediately, warning that they will all be forcefully kicked out if the Academy administration finds out about a hidden dragon child living on campus. Princess Erin steps forward with absolute resolve, looking right at Cyan and swearing that she will keep this a complete secret from everyone. Cyan asks if Her Highness is truly serious, and she confirms it instantly, looking softly down at Nana out of pure sympathy. Erin points out that the child will never fit in with purebred dragons or standard humans, but notes that Cyan clearly wants to take care of her regardless of the heavy consequences. Erin blushes deeply and sheepishly asks if she can come visit Cyan's private room sometimes, rapidly clarifying that she only wants to see Nana and that he shouldn't take it the wrong way. Cyan smiles and agrees that this will be their shared little secret, forcing a flustered Erin to eagerly swear to it. Cyan announces that he must be heading out, leaving Erin standing with a racing heart as her attendants try to process her bizarre behavior. Erin smiles to herself, wondering if this shared secret means she is finally getting much closer to Cyan, while her guardian knight frantically asks if she is feeling physically unwell. Back in the private quarters, the demonic sword manifests from the smoke to mock Cyan about missing out on all the fun while it was sleeping, jokingly asking why he doesn't just reveal their shared housing arrangements too. Cyan aggressively shuts the blade down, ordering it to be completely quiet and reflect on its actions before he wraps up his gear to head out. High above the jagged mountain ranges, a pair of dark wings and a crimson-winged silhouette cut through the evening sky. The purebred red dragon. Catalina suddenly halts, sniffing the air as she senses a sickening, unnatural scent lingering over the region. Lucian pauses beneath the starry night sky and realizes they are floating directly above the outskirts of the Luen Academy, sensing a hybrid aura emanating from the territory that he absolutely cannot permit to exist as a true dragon. Deep within the rugged outskirts of Luen, the two purebred entities begin scanning the rocky pathways below. Brian lunges forward to stop Nana as she sprints wildly down the path, completely thrilled by how massive and exciting the open terrain is. Cyan watches her run with a calm smile, noting that they are 10 kilometers away from the center of Luen, making it the perfect safe spot for her to play around as much as she wants. The demonic sword mocks him for acting like a real father, teasingly suggesting he should find her a mom next, like the princess from earlier. Cyan's eyes flash with a sudden purple glare as he commands the blade to wait, sensing a sickening, dangerous force rapidly descending on their position. Cyan shouts for Brian and Nana to get back, as a sudden, devastating explosion shatters the stone path, prompting Cyan to draw his weapon and command both of them to stay strictly behind him. The dust clears to reveal two high-ranking purebred dragons hovering directly above the ruin, casting a terrifying magical pressure over the field. Lucian steps forward to scoop up Nana, while Catalina glares down with glowing yellow eyes, muttering that it is absolutely disgusting to find a vile hybrid creature dwelling in human territory. Lucian demands to know if Cyan is the master of the halfling, noticing that the human is also carrying the forbidden demonic sword. The blade screams back in a complete fury, but Lucian dismisses the weapon as an inferior thing that has degraded itself into becoming a human's common slave. Lucian commands them to hand over the half-human, half-dragon hybrid immediately, promising to let the humans walk away alive if they comply. Cyan stands his ground in the ruins, looking the white dragon dead in the eye and coldly telling him to shut up. Lucian smirks with absolute arrogance, completely amused by the human's defiance as Cyan unleashes his killer intent. A massive shockwave erupts as Cyan commands Brian to take Nana and get as far away from the battlefield as humanly possible. Lucian slides through the rock debris, swinging his blade with a brilliant display of blue magical energy as he sneers that this weak display is exactly why humans are deemed inferior. Cyan unleashes his thick fog ninth form, manifesting the demonic sword in a brilliant flash of crimson energy that leaves Catalina completely paralyzed with shock. Lucian grips his sword as Cyan blasts forward like a meteor, shattering the ground beneath them. Lucian roars in anger as Cyan delivers a visceral, rapid-fire blue energy slash that cuts straight through the dragon's guard and creates a deafening shockwave across the valley. Lucian is sent flying through the swirling blue field, groaning in pain as another heavy impact shatters the rock formations behind him. Cyan seamlessly transitions into his thick fog third form, shifting through the vapor with a rushing fog storm sequence that leaves the dragons completely unable to track his movements. Catalina screams that she will block the incoming strike, prompting Lucian to frantically warn her to back off, because she is absolutely no match for Cyan's speed. Catalina ignores the warning, boasting that she has put up an absolute dragon's barrier forged from 1,000 years' worth of accumulated mana. The short-lived human could never hope to pierce. Cyan vanishes from sight and deploys his fog sword. 8 fluttering petals, a lightning-fast flurry of 8 consecutive sword strikes that crash directly into the Absolute shield. The mana shield shatters with a deafening boom, sending explosive shockwaves ripping through Catalina as she stares in pure horror, unable to comprehend how her ultimate defense was bypassed. Cyan flashes through midair to deliver a punishing double serial slash, tearing through the defenses and leaving the red dragon completely broken. Catalina trembles in total disbelief, screaming to know what kind of monster he is and demanding to know how the god of fog could possibly wield such absolute authority. Lucian slides back, grunting in pain as blue magical energy surges around him, admitting that Cyan is indeed a worthy opponent. Lucian invokes his polymorph spell, abandoning his human shell in a massive explosion of light to return completely to his titanic, original dragon form. The colossal beast unleashes a massive shockwave, but Cyan spins through the electrical discharges, gripping his blade with absolute precision. Cyan channels a blinding aura of blue lightning, rushing straight into the heart of the transformation. Cyan exposes the fatal flaw of the spell, moving to strike at the exact microsecond when the dragon is at his most vulnerable state. Lucian roars in a complete panic as a trail of red energy closes the distance, realizing too late that this human somehow knows the exact structural weakness of polymorph. The dragon lets out a deafening roar as Cyan strikes like a lightning bolt, declaring that the beast is far too late to save itself. A catastrophic explosion of red and black energy violently consumes the colossal dragon, tearing through its scales and completely neutralizing the high-level threat. Brian and Nana rush back to the bloody battlefield, where Nana covers her eyes in total distress, crying out that she cannot bear to look at the carnage. Cyan stands amidst the smoking monster remains, tossing a massive chunk of fresh bloody dragon meat to Brian and telling him to eat up because it is precious meat. Nana immediately begs for a piece of the dragon meat as well, but Brian and Cyan turn around to instantly and comically shut her down. Meanwhile, a spy stands before Ashelvert's desk to report that an unknown, mysterious force seems to be actively supporting his younger brother, prompting Ashel to ask coldly if that is all the data he brought. Ashel narrows his eyes in deep thought, noting that he fails to see the extreme sense of desperation that Kellen Diego possessed before he originally left on the mission. Ashel locks his gaze onto the rewritten spy, delivering a sharp interrogation to test his loyalty because he is beginning to heavily doubt the report. Kellen flawlessly bypasses the suspicion by offering a grand blessing of Lumendel, prompting a satisfied Ashel to dismiss him by stating it was just a routine ritual check. Kellen steps out into the hallway and breathes a sigh of relief, reminding himself to be incredibly careful so he does not get in young Master Cyan's way. He accidentally bumps into a maid in the corridor, who sheepishly introduces herself as Emily before he asks what brings her to this sector. Ashel then looks her over and asks if her name is Emily, before asking if she could possibly do him a quick favor. Far away, in the Dragon Council chambers, elites panic over the shocking news that Master Lucian and Miss Catalina have completely gone missing after manifesting divine powers on the outskirts of Luen. The investigators reveal that the missing dragon's mana stones have been completely shattered, and that the killer likely used advanced dark elemental magic to erase all other physical evidence from the battlefield. The council notes that while the legendary 9-star mage Kundal Quazel possesses the raw power to execute 2 dragons, he does not wield dark magic, meaning a mysterious 4th individual is operating in the shadows. The elders look through the academy records, pointing at a dark element user named Cyan Vert, who notoriously survived an assault by the Devil Dragon and has ties to the deaths of Reynold Crimson and Zickerman Albus. The council grows furious, noting that those fallen operatives work directly with them to supply testing materials, and they begin looking for the hidden connecting link between these incidents. Back at the Royal Academy dorms, an attendant bursts into the room with a massive, special cake crafted directly by the chefs of the Imperial Palace. Nana screams with absolute joy, declaring her love for the food, while Cyan stands in the background and happily tells her to eat as much as she wants. Cyan watches her smile, realizing that if purebred dragons can already track Nana's presence, he must ensure absolutely no one can ever lay a finger on the people he protects. A companion walks in and comments that Cyan looks incredibly happy, asking if something exceptionally good just happened to him. Cyan simply grins to himself, replying that he just had a very nice, comforting thought about the future. The scene shifts to the beautiful Vert residence garden, where a royal guest, Luenell, comments that Ashel is looking exceptionally well, prompting Ashel to credit his high standing to His Majesty. Luenell looks closely at him, asking how much longer Ashel intends to rot in this isolated estate in the middle of nowhere while expressing concern over his missing rivals. Luenell smiles sharply, asking if Ashel is secretly terrified that his rivals might completely threaten his position of power, forcing a serious Ashel to state that they shouldn't speak of such taboo matters. The friend laughs it off and shifts the conversation, asking if his younger brother's name is Cyan, and revealing that the Duke is heavily considering an engagement between Cyan and Princess Erin. Luenell advises Ashel not to feel rushed, noting that the more public attention and power Cyan gains, the easier it will be to manage him, which brings a calm smile back to Ashel's face. Ashel pours a drink and proudly introduces a brilliant new follower named Boris Lelm, calling him an absolute jewel that he personally found while scouting out the local slums. 2 full years pass within the timeline, as Cyan deliberately keeps as low a profile as humanly possible, successfully adjusting to standard academy routines alongside his peers. A blue-haired warrior kneels out of breath in the grand city square as massive wooden doors are forcefully thrown open. A veteran commander stands tall at the entryway, demanding to know if the young warrior thoroughly enjoyed his recent travels to Fruina. The veteran notes that the young fighter seems to have completely made up his mind, prompting the warrior to announce that he is officially joining the Knights of Light. The commander points out that this choice continues the long-standing will of his noble family line, while the warrior admits he is simply worried about the safety of his younger siblings. Inside the grand estate hall, a bearded elder laughs out loud over reports about Cyan acting incredibly shy, calling the rumor completely amusing. Meanwhile, Cyan stands in the quiet courtyard, looking straight ahead with a soft smile as he announces that he has deeply missed his sister. Alice Vert steps into the street, marveling at how Cyan has grown to match her exact height and joking that he will be much taller than her soon. Cyan playfully asks if maybe she is just shrinking instead, prompting a smiling Alice to tell him to stop right there as Cyan internally reflects on the exact date. He remembers this precise summer day vividly from his past life, noting with a dark expression that it was the absolute last day he ever saw his beloved sister alive. Alice asks why he isn't heading back to the family mansion for the upcoming summer break, and Cyan bitterly responds that absolutely no one, besides her, would ever welcome him back there. Cyan explains that Ashel is currently occupying the estate, and that the Duke's treacherous wife tries to assassinate him in every single opportunity she gets. He notes that returning home right now would be an act of total suicide, resolving to stay away until graduation before asking Alice if she is on good terms with Kranz. Cyan states that being friends with Kranz is completely impossible, reminding her of the brutal ways he was treated and revealing that Kranz even tried to outright murder him once. Alice gasps in absolute shock, while Brian steps forward to completely testify to the truth of the assassination attempt, leaving Alice devastated that she was away in Fruina, completely unaware of the danger. Cyan reassures her that the real villains are the Duke's wife and Kranz, telling his sister that none of this is her fault. Alice's expression shifts into pure, unbridled rage as she demands to know if Cyan has spoken to anyone else about these hidden crimes. Cyan watches her intense focus, while Alice tells him that he does not need to bottle everything up inside and that he can always depend on her. Alice fiercely vows to protect him from now on, before announcing she must briefly handle some urgent business elsewhere and ordering Brian to take exceptional care of little Cyan. Brian stammers that he will do his best, while Cyan watches her march away toward the main Gothic estate under a stormy sky. Cyan reflects silently that he has never seen his sister look so completely consumed by rage in either of his lifetimes. Inside the estate training hall, an arrogant Kranz stands over a bloodied, beaten opponent, mocking him as an orphaned piece of trash and demanding that he get back up. The victim begs for the beating to stop, but Kranz lunges forward with a heavy wooden blade strike that shatters the surrounding floor tiles. Suddenly, the heavy doors explode inward as Alice strides into the chamber, her eyes blazing with absolute wrath as she commands Kranz to apologize right now. Cyan watches the family manor from a distance, recalling that he saw his sister look this terrifying only once in his past life, and he resolves to protect her from her miserable future this time around. An attendant delivers 2 folders to Cyan, explaining that one official document came directly from the academy, while the other was retrieved from a local janitor. The noble examines the packages, pointing at a deep red envelope sealed with the official gold crest of the imperial family. He realizes the palace is throwing their annual grand banquet, but notes that the second hidden document contains a high-stakes assassination order targeting Drenian Nephilius. Since the target is the direct younger brother of the current empress, the order comes as a total shocker, prompting the noble to ask Cyan if he actually intends to go. Cyan places a demonic sword restriction seal over his gear, ordering his team to make all necessary preparations to infiltrate the imperial palace banquet. Suddenly, a voice calls out that she is hungry, causing Brian to scream out in absolute, face-palming horror. Meanwhile, heavy boots echo through the main hall of the Vert Manor as a massive wooden door is violently kicked off its hinges with a loud crash. The estate guards stammer in terror as Alice strides past them, demanding to know exactly where the Duchess is hiding. Alice storms straight into the luxurious private solar, where Duchess Margaret Urzeth sits relaxing on a velvet couch. Margaret looks up in mock surprise, welcoming her stepdaughter back and asking with a fake smile if she has been faring well. Alice doesn't utter a single word, instantly flaring a massive surge of blue water spirit magic that completely erupts across the room. The Duchess screams for the guards in a complete panic, demanding to know if Alice has entirely lost her mind. Alice glares through the magical pressure, roaring that Margaret explicitly tried to murder Cyan, leaving the surrounding guards terrified as they wonder how she discovered the hidden plot. Alice points out that the Duchess's defensive panic perfectly confirms the crime, while Margaret desperately commands her elite guard force to drag the girl out of the room. An elite captain lunges forward with an apology, but Alice's eyes flash with a brilliant blue light as she prepares to strike. Alice invokes her elemental spirit, Undine, unleashing a visceral, rapid-fire tidal wave that shatters the guard's weapon and slams him violently into the stone walls. The remaining forces look on in absolute horror, wondering how a single girl can wield spirit magic capable of dismantling elite house guards so effortlessly as Alice advances on the Duchess. Alice states that Cyan explicitly named Margaret as the mastermind behind the assassination attempt from 2 years ago, asking if the Duchess honestly believed she could get away with it just because Cyan kept quiet. Margaret angrily barks that Alice is choosing the words of an inferior child over her own, but Alice cuts her off completely, ordering Margaret Urzeth to shut her mouth and prepare to face the Duke's absolute wrath. The surrounding guards lie completely broken on the floor as a blonde noble enters, muttering that Alice is still completely unaware of what she has brought upon herself. Duke Valarth steps into the ruin, calmly stating that he already knows his wife tried to kill Cyan Vert and that he has absolutely no intention of making any excuses for her actions. Alice gasps in complete shock as the Duke steps over the debris, asking Alice if she honestly believed that Cyan was a helpless fool who needed saving. The Duke pulls out an imperial banquet invitation and hands it over, ordering Alice to go take his place at the palace to relax herself, noting that Cyan is infinitely stronger than anyone thinks before he departs back for the barracks. Even though he is only 13 years old, he stands with a presence that demands attention. A sudden shout breaks the silence as someone calls out for Miss Alice. The atmosphere grows heavy as a dramatic cry for Cecilia echoes through the room. A formal greeting welcomes Miss Alice back, but it is immediately followed by an emotional demand to know where she has been all this time without even sending a single letter. She softly offers her apologies, carrying herself with the unmistakable grace of Cecilia Rien, a high-ranking knight of the Knights of Light. Deciding it is time for a change of scenery, they make plans to head straight for the Imperial Palace. An unexpected exclamation cuts through the air as someone spots a deer inside the estate. Cyan addresses Nana, telling her to put her tail away, who struggles and groans with intense effort as she tries to suppress her monstrous nature. With a sharp shout, the transformation finishes, leaving Cyan amazed that she can seamlessly hide her body parts from view. Cyan firmly asks Nana if she remembers everything he taught her, and she cheerfully affirms her loyalty to her young master. Nana shrieks in surprise as a powerful impact shakes the area, forcing the dark-coated swordsman to keep his guard up. A blonde knight notices an incoming transmission and casually mentions that a group of bandits is blocking their path. The bandit leader laughs menacingly, demanding they hand over everything they own, but Cyan coldly orders his men to just get rid of the pests. A frantic question about what is happening is quickly dismissed, as Cyan labels the attackers as mere insects. A devastating sword strike detonates across the battlefield, prompting a knight to yell out for his commander. An aggressive warrior lunges forward, seeking bloody revenge for Fernando, but Brian steps up to intercept the strike. Brian lets out a rough sigh of exhaustion after taking a heavy blow that sends him reeling from the sheer impact. With a swift flash of steel, the enemies are cut down, proving to everyone that the weakling Brian is no longer helpless. Brian declares with absolute certainty that he has grown stronger, instantly jumping to follow his young master's next command. A heavy thud signals a fallen foe as Brian offers his thanks, noting that the crowd is far larger than usual and suggesting they postpone their current plans. A stern voice objects, insisting that the scheduled assassination of Drenia Nephilis absolutely must happen right now. Cyan stares at a target photograph with pure hatred, muttering about how sickening the man truly is. Cyan reveals a shocking truth that leaves the room stunned, firmly repeating that the target is actually his fiancée. He glances down at a list, realizing with concern that a fragile young child will also be attending the gathering. The guest is revealed to be Lunav Rainreaver, granddaughter of the Garam Mage Association's president, raising suspicions as to why a girl who avoids society is suddenly attending a royal banquet. After learning that the president personally ordered her attendance, Cyan secretly ponders what kind of dangerous game the old man is playing. Recognizing that something is deeply wrong with this banquet, the group arrives in the capital, noting how massive the main roads are. A collision in the crowded street prompts an angry shout to watch where they are going, but a young lady quickly offers a playful apology. The traveler laughs it off politely, causing the naive girl to cheerfully remark on how kind the city people seem to be. Cyan silently laments her complete lack of real-world knowledge, just as Brian panics over the terrifying change in Nana's eyes. Cyan curses under his breath as Nana locks her golden gaze ahead, letting out a dangerously intense growl that she is starving. Her massive hunger causes her to leak a devastating pressure wave, leaving the young lady trembling in pure fear. Realizing that the crowd will discover her identity if this keeps up, Cyan roars an order to get her to a restaurant immediately, sending Brian scrambling to obey. Cyan steps back in disbelief that a simple craving could unleash such an aura, while Nana finally relaxes inside a diner, feeling alive again. Cyan counts his coins, glad he brought a fortune along, right before a sudden shift in the air forces him to sense a bizarre spike of foreign mana. A mysterious figure cloaked in magical energy extends a hand, offering a polite greeting and calling out, "Cyan Vert," by his exact name. Cyan tenses up, wondering how the stranger knows his identity before coldly demanding who they are and if they can sit down. The stranger offers a gentle smile and introduces herself simply as Lunav, a name that strikes an immediate chord of recognition in Cyan's mind. She jokes about being an outcast compared to someone as famous as Cyan, while Brian and Nana watch from a distance, whispering about whether the two are actually friends. Lunav points out how close his guardian knight and maid seem to be, remarking that Cyan appears to be a much warmer person than the dark rumors suggest. Suspicious of her sudden flattery, Cyan tries to figure out her true motive, shifting the conversation to ask if she came to the capital specifically for the banquet. She softly confirms his suspicion, prompting Cyan to reveal that they will definitely be crossing paths again since he received an invitation as well. Cyan silently deduces that she must be a high-ranking noble who received the exact same letter, just as Lunav stands up to cut their introduction short. She looks back with an intense plea for him to remember her, proudly stating her full name is Lunav Rainreaver. The pieces finally click together for Cyan, remembering her true identity as the granddaughter of the powerful Garam Mage Association president, Regan's Rainreaver. A dark memory resurfaces from his past life where this girl died, tragically young at the academy, making him realize that he keeps altering the timeline by crossing paths with people he never met before. Annoyed that the future keeps constantly shifting, Cyan looks over the glowing city square, dreading that this gathering is destined to become the infamous Banquet of Blood. Inside the dressing rooms, Princess Erin presents herself, asking Leximus if her formal attire looks acceptable. Her attendant showers her with compliments in hopes of being able to leave the runway show as fast as possible. Leximus reassures her that young Master Cyan will absolutely adore the look, sending the princess into a stuttering, blushing panic about being seen a certain way by Cyan. The teasing intensifies until she tells them to stop, since it is entirely obvious, just as a surprise package arrives as a gift from her brother. The princess says, "Stop to Leximus," claiming she doesn't like Cyan. Cyan scans the room, noting that if Kellen is already present, then Ashel cannot be very far behind. An informant confirms that Ashel is currently with Prince Luenel, before urgently asking Cyan if it is possible for him to abandon the banquet entirely. Cyan narrows his eyes, wondering if their purification mission has been compromised, as the informant admits to having a terrible feeling about the night. He reveals that Ashel explicitly ordered him to flee the palace early because a small event has been prepared, tipping Cyan off to the mastermind behind the impending slaughter. The informant admits he could bear to see Cyan get hurt, but Cyan firmly tells him to leave immediately since his own life is in far greater danger. With a final respectful nod, the ally retreats, leaving Cyan to smirk bitterly at his brother's twisted definition of a small event. Cyan glares forward with absolute fury, cursing Ashel for being a far more unhinged lunatic than he ever anticipated. Shifting back to his hidden team, Cyan is questioned about his sudden distraction regarding psychological influences. Cyan addresses his faction, stating they have no choice but to push off the purification mission, earning a sharp demand for an explanation. He delivers the grim truth that the entire hall is about to turn into an ocean of blood, insisting they verify the perimeter immediately since time has completely run out. Cyan reassures his ally that her perverted fiancé will perish in the upcoming chaos anyway, turning away to get straight to work. His partner barks out a final warning to explain himself later, right as a startled voice calls out in disbelief upon spotting Alice. A respectful bow greets the instructor, followed by a confused question regarding what could have possibly brought her to the capital. Cyan curses silently, realizing that Alice is about to get dragged straight into the disaster, just as a noble flatters her by comparing her to a walking flower. Grounded by the reality that his hands are already entirely full, Cyan watches as Drenian Nephelis steps forward to formally introduce himself. Cyan corners Brian in the archway, delivering a swift directive that the eager knight promises to execute with his entire life. Noting that Brian has been walking on air lately, Cyan commands him to thoroughly inspect the underground pathways of the Imperial Palace. When Brian hesitates, Cyan barks at him to just go, only for the knight to suddenly point behind his master and scream a frantic warning. Detecting a spy peering at them from the shadows, Brian lunges forward with a fierce vow to take the intruder down. A crashing impact echoes down the corridor as the spy is slammed to the ground, but Cyan quickly tells Brian to hold his fire since they recognize her. Brian halts his blade in confusion while the groaning spy recovers on the stone floor. Deep in the subterranean darkness, a hooded necromancer raises a glowing artifact, calling upon his hidden subordinates to finally arise. Upstairs at the gala, a dismissive noble sneers at the crowd before a polite voice approaches to greet Princess Erin. Lunav is approached by an elite student who recognizes her, causing her eyes to widen in complete shock that her name is known. The student smiles, praising her as the legendary genius of the Garam Kingdom, while Lunav politely defers the compliment. A cloaked figure expresses hope that Cyan recognizes her worth as well, prompting a startled question about how she could possibly know him. Lunav beams, bragging that they were together just yesterday, which drives her into a frantic inner panic about her hidden feelings leaking out. The student smirks at the obvious reaction, boldly teasing her about being completely in love with Cyan. A piercing scream shatters the festive atmosphere, causing the entire ballroom to freeze in absolute terror. People start yelling for the guards as guests stare in total disbelief at the horrific entities breaching the palace. A scarred, hooded monstrosity stands tall amidst the crashing masonry, sending the nobles into a frenzy as they shriek about monsters and missing security. Spitting blood on the ruined pavement, a mutilated creature locks its eyes onto the royalty, hoarsely croaking out that it has found the princess. Amidst the escalating madness, Nana, now dressed as a maid, calmly introduces herself to an elite defender right before a heavy shockwave rattles the hall. The other maid watches from behind, fueled by intense jealousy that Cyan would abandon her for a girl who is apparently cuter than she is. Cyan ignores the drama, demanding to know if it was truly Ashel who brought her into this place, prompting her to reveal that he offered her a job. Cyan tenses at the mention of employment, recalling how Ashel aggressively tried to recruit his staff the moment he left for the academy. She proudly notes that she turned down the offer, but Cyan sighs in exhaustion, knowing his relentless brother hasn't given up his schemes yet. Recognizing that Emily's survival completely alters his past memories, Cyan determines that Ashel must have been tracking his movements through hidden spies. Cyan mutters his brother's name with venom, while another guest holding a vibrant red bow tie boasts that it was a personal gift from Ashel. A nearby scout inspects the gift closely, suddenly recoiling in disgust as a foul metallic scent fills the air. On the balcony, Ashel informs Prince Luenel that the carnage has officially begun, boasting that their asset Boris proved to be highly useful. He declares that they will continuously exploit him to forcefully reshape an empire currently drenched in soft peace, showing the world exactly what kind of rulers it needs. Down in the corridors, commanders scream at the crowd to evacuate immediately and leave the frontline defense to the heavy guard. A knight implores the princess to prioritize her escape, but Lunov steps forward with immense resolve, swearing to stay and help. Eren thanks her warmly, but their conversation is cut short by a monstrous roar as a warrior realizes a second wave of beasts has ambushed them. A panicked soldier screams for his captain as a massive, towering mandrake demon materializes in the center of the hall. The defenders lose all hope, crying out in terror over why frontline warfare beasts are suddenly loose inside the imperial capital. An academy instructor steps into the fray, roaring at the surviving soldiers to use this distraction to evacuate the civilians immediately. The outer guard forms a shield wall to protect the fleeing nobles, bracing themselves as the main assault is landing. Cyan notices the shifting movement of the horde, realizing with absolute horror that the monsters are completely bypassing the guards to target Princess Eren. Shadowed commanders yell at the top of their lungs for the Imperial Guards to protect Princess Eren at all costs. As the dust settles from a massive blast, a weeping noble laments that it is all her fault, begging for forgiveness from the heavily wounded Morris. Mages gasp in awe as Lunov flawlessly fuses her elemental spells together, though a nearby medic warns the princess that they must retreat immediately. The royal guard charges forward to buy time, allowing the princess to reluctantly agree to move toward the secure shelters. She vows never to forget Sir Morris's ultimate sacrifice right before a protective wall of dense mana slams down to intercept an incoming strike. The casting mage warns the soldiers that a single touch from the monster's skin will kill them, pleading with them to stay behind the barrier and survive. Delivering a final absolute order, the commander rallies the remaining heavy knights, who scream a fierce oath for the safety of the princess. Alice screams at the vanguard to fall back, unleashing a massive freezing spell that coats the entire corridor in thick ice. She commands the survivors to follow her lead, proudly introducing herself as Alice Vert, the Academy's premier instructor. She stands tall amidst the wreckage, noting that the primary mandrake has finally stopped moving after being shredded by her blade technique. While her allies finish off the remaining stragglers, Cyan watches from the rafters, knowing Alice must secure the princess while his team handles the true threat. As the escaping royals wonder if Alice is related to Cyan, they run straight into a dead end, realizing the monsters are tracking their exact coordinates. A lone swordsman grips his hilt, questioning if he has enough strength to solo a high-ranking nightcrawler entirely by himself. The backup forces arrive with a massive explosion, cutting through the final wave until the corridor finally falls completely silent. Inspecting the grotesque carcass, Cyan notes a deeply unsettling feeling, realizing the creature is actually a forbidden marionette. He stares at the blood-splattered steps, explaining that the banned necromancy spell turns the dead into mindless puppets, proving their enemies are trying to spark a full-scale war. Heaving heavily among the bodies, a weary fighter yells out for his father as the dust settles. The commander dismisses the concern, telling his men to take care of the other wounded first, just as another massive wave of entities breaches the lower walls. The team inspects a strange package, questioning why Ashel would suddenly send Cyan a gift when he has never done anything like this before. Brian points out that Cyan has always harbored a deep, simmering resentment toward Ashel that goes far deeper than trivial family issues. A sudden shift in the air forces Nana to warn Brian that they need to run immediately, right as her eyes change into something completely dangerous. Brian yells at Emily to get out of the area just as a massive, muscular monster known as a behemoth breaches the palace perimeter. A noble screams that everything is over, but Drenian manages to slip out faster than anyone else to save his own skin. A massive explosion rocks the corridor as Drenian panics internally, declaring he absolutely cannot die here before seeing his lovely maid, Lily. Fleeing survivors desperately ask if the back doors are safe, while an elite warrior yells out in absolute fury against the incoming threat. A terrified scream echoes through the hall as the nobles notice a sudden surge of water, mana filling the corridor. Alice flashes into the battlefield, unleashing a devastating freezing spell that instantly shatters the attacking monsters into thousands of sharp fragments. The crowd gapes in absolute awe, completely stunned that these mysterious newcomers managed to eradicate the entire horde in a single instant. Alice proudly declares her identity and orders the knights to guard the princess, while a wounded soldier recovers slightly from the blast. Lunav steps forward to warn everyone that the next wave is about to land, prompting the royal knights to rally and build a defensive perimeter around the princess. A defender vows to provide heavy backup support, shouting for the knights to hold the line even if he falls in battle. A lone swordsman slashes through a beast, noting grimly that no matter how many he cuts down, more just keep appearing as if they track their exact location. A thunderous impact shakes the foundation as defenders scream for help against a high-ranking demonic beast loose inside the palace walls. Realizing Cyan isn't there to shield them, a determined defender steps up as the sole protector of the group, vowing to slay the monster approaching them. The beast lets out a blood-curdling roar and charges, but the warrior lunges forward with a fierce strike to block its massive claws. A heavy explosion rings out as the warrior grunts from the shockwave, confidently declaring that he successfully stopped the impact without letting the girl get scratched. The dark beast roars and strikes back with crushing force, leaving the battered fighter to wonder if this is truly the end for him as he apologizes to his young master. A massive flash of light obliterates the danger, leaving onlookers completely shocked and scrambling to see what just happened. A mysterious figure steps out from a cloud of purple energy, seamlessly slicing through a massive shadow monster as the group realizes Nana is somehow involved. Mages exert their remaining strength, channeling raw, glowing energy from their hands as the relentless siege drags on. A swordsman executes a heavy slash, muttering that this fight will never end at this rate because the royal knights are going to burn through their stamina very soon. A heavy shield smash holds back a charging foe as a defender recognizes the reanimated corpses, realizing they are facing an army of the undead. A desperate mage racks her brain for a countermeasure, concluding that their only hope is to channel light magic, the absolute opposite of dark magic. A warrior turns to Princess Erin, frantically begging her to imbue his sword blade with her royal mana. The defenders form a final wall of steel, reassuring the anxious princess that they can hold the line a little longer while she channels her power. Lunav begins a dual incantation, admitting that while combining two entirely different types of mana is extremely difficult, he has no choice but to try. He unleashes a swirling burst of energy, stating that he is still entirely unsure if the complex spell will succeed. A dark-coated figure stands over a fallen enemy, realizing that Ashel has deployed both marionettes and mandrakes, officially confirming that Boris has become his subordinate. Cyan notes that a modern human is somehow wielding an ancient, forbidden form of necromancy, sensing the distinctive mana of daze stones radiating across the bloodbath. Surveying the grim aftermath, the blood-soaked fighter mutters to himself that he needs to get changed into clean clothes. A massive blue flare erupts across the battlefield, shocking onlookers who realize that a temporary light-type spirit manifestation has just been summoned. A warrior warns that normal mana cannot be mixed like this, shouting that they must stop her immediately before her physical body completely breaks down from the strain. A celestial entity floats within the magical burst, looking down with pity at the cruel, unpleasant fate of the child below. The spirit extends her glowing hands, releasing a devastating force wave that commands the incoming monsters to stay away from the girl. A shockwave violently clears the room, but a masked knight warns that the fallen puppets are already getting back up, shouting at the mage to stop before she kills herself from exhaustion. A sweeping blade strike labeled, "The Spirit King's Authority" cuts through the center of the hall. Alice gasps for air as a thick black fog rolls into the room, prompting the group to wonder if yet another marionette has arrived. Alice narrows her eyes at the encroaching darkness, just as she shouts that she's being completely consumed by the red fog. A sinister voice bids a final farewell to Alice, leaving her completely stranded in the dark mist as she scrambles to comprehend what is happening. A defender notes in disbelief that someone completely blocked off the local mana to nullify the spirit manifestation, right as an army of monsters begins a fresh charge. A sharp clash of swords rings out through the haze, forcing a red-eyed warrior to smirk, realizing his suspicions have been completely confirmed. A group of masked fighters secretly converse, asking if anyone can sense a specific type of monster-like mana coming from anyone other than Lunav. A warrior prepares an aggressive assault, telling his partner to help him close the physical distance to the target in a single go. A massive blast detonates as a commander barks a warning for everyone to stay on high alert. A rapid series of sword slashes cuts through the fog, completely vaporizing the reanimated puppets and leaving Alice kneeling on the ground. As the battlefield falls completely silent, the survivors look around in shock, wondering who the masked person was before noticing that Lunav has collapsed. A frantic voice begs Lunav to open her eyes, just as a sudden monstrous shriek causes everyone to turn toward the princess in terror. A figure, cloaked in red flames, violently grabs a noblewoman, prompting an armored knight to roar at the attacker to let her go right now. Eren senses a familiar aura from the assailant, right before a knight draws his steel and roars a curse. A swordsman lunges forward to strike, shouting in absolute confusion as a thick wall of fog completely blocks his vision. A desperate cry rings out to stay away from Lunav, right before a massive lightning strike labeled the God Stinger tears through the dark mist. The attackers gasp as the target completely dissolves into thin air, while a serious voice reveals he destroyed the focal jewel to stop attracting the horde. He directs the survivors to flee through the secure front gates of the palace, leaving a baffled warrior to question the true identity of their savior. The remaining students confirm they are uninjured, prompting a declaration that getting these children to safety is his absolute highest priority. A faint whisper calls out Cyan's name, right before a sudden burst of purple energy prompts a soldier to question what kind of maid possesses that much power. Cyan stares in shock at the field as Nana struggles heavily against a swirling mass of dark shadows. Widespread rumors spread regarding the high death toll of the banquet, falsely claiming that Princess Eren engineered the entire catastrophe using a daze stone to seize total power. Because of the engineered chaos, Ashel and Luenell are universally praised as the glorious heroes who benefited the most from the incident. A dark-coated protagonist looks down at the city's skyline, bitterly noting that humans who sacrifice their own kind for political benefit are far worse than demons. As the team prepares to leave, Karam delivers a final chilling piece of information, revealing that a companion smelled exactly like a dazed stone too. Nana bares her sharp teeth in a feral frenzy, growling that Emily smells delicious while a blonde knight frantically tries to hold her back. Emily flees in total terror as Nana pursues her like a ravenous monster, driven by a bizarre, unstoppable urge to hunt her down. A massive surge of purple mana detonates across the clearing, sending the defenders flying backwards from the raw physical shockwave. Brian screams out for his young master in pure panic as Cyan steps directly into the line of fire, hoarsely calling for Karam to hurry. Karam grabs the necklace from the maid. The maid recognizes it as the necktie that Ashel gave her. Nana's golden eyes widen in absolute horror as she snaps out of her trance, realizing with tears that she has violently attacked her own master. Cyan looks up with a completely calm profile, reassuring the weeping draconic human that the strike didn't hurt at all and she did absolutely nothing wrong. With a swift shift of his cloak, Cyan calls for his team to pack up and leave immediately since the area has turned into an absolute mess. Deep within a ruined stone corridor, Luenell looks around in confusion, noting that he doesn't see a single monster corpse left behind. Princess Eren sprints through the dust, her father crying out in immense relief as he discovers that Eren is completely safe and uninjured. Eren credits her survival entirely to her two mages, prompting Luenell to coldly state that he is simply glad she didn't end up dead. Eren softly returns the sentiment, but Luenell turns his back to address the remaining lords, sending a flash of severe panic through a nearby observer. Luenell claims to know the true mastermind, stepping forward to declare that Lunav Rainreaver is officially under arrest. An angry defender orders him to lower his sword, but the official smirks, claiming that the Garam group orchestrated the slaughter to spark continental chaos. He reveals that a highly suspicious aura of dark mana was explicitly detected inside her private quarters last night, forcing a royal patriarch to demand the truth. A lord commands his daughter to leave the investigation to him, stating he merely kept an eye on the foreign delegates as a safety precaution. Lunav looks down in deep distress, wondering if this horrific framing is a trap or something her grandfather fully intended to happen before she's hauled off to prison. Cyan stands quietly in the courtyard, reflecting on how he managed to prevent far more casualties than in his past life, even if he couldn't stop the event from being branded, the Banquet of Blood. Inside the estate, Alice tells Cyan he didn't need to push himself so hard, admitting they would have been doomed if a mysterious warrior hadn't cleared their path. She notes that the Savior's physical height was remarkably similar to Cyan's, playfully teasing him about his newfound muscle mass before checking on his recovery. Cyan asks if everyone is safe, prompting a nearby observer to realize that Cyan is deeply wary of Ashel's true movements. Ashel reveals he came to deliver news, confirming that a silver bracelet embedded with a cursed daze stone was explicitly found inside Lunav's room. Cyan asks if they know who originally gave her the artifact, and the informant notes that a palace merchant was suspected but was found dead this morning. Ashel locks his eyes onto Cyan, sharply asking if he personally received any unusual items on the day of the banquet. Cyan looks away with a completely blank expression, realizing instantly that this interrogation is a total sham and that his servant Emily is in danger. Back in his private chambers, Cyan suddenly clutches his head in intense pain, stumbling as his allies panic over his physical condition. Alice notes that Cyan has lost a massive amount of blood, urging him to lie down and rest while the investigator prepares to leave the room. Cyan looks back with a dazed expression, firmly stating that he has absolutely no memory of receiving any gifts that day. Ashel smiles coldly, thanking him for the answer and noting that he has no reason to eliminate anyone else, though he secretly wished this was his chance to get rid of Cyan permanently. Cyan collapses onto his mattress as his furious sister slams the door shut, ordering him to stop talking and listen to his family's medical advice. In a dark alleyway, a terrified middleman begs for his life, swearing he followed orders and that the target will never discover the truth, but a hooded assassin ruthlessly draws his steel. Muttering that the entire situation is completely unpleasant, the killer delivers a final command to rest in peace, plunging his blade into the witness. The cloaked figure notes that a corpse was left behind last time, insisting that he must ensure a mistake like that never happens again. He drops a glowing crimson artifact into the jaws of a monstrous creature, coldly ordering the beast to eat the evidence up completely. Out in the peaceful countryside, Emily gasps in surprise as a cheerful Brian arrives with a box of fresh apples he picked up from the town. Emily thanks him warmly as they enjoy the pleasant weather, right before the conversation shifts back to the suspicious package sent by Ashel. Cyan steps into the clearing, warning Emily with absolute gravity that neither the palace nor the Vert estate is safe for her anymore. Cyan explains he has urgent business to clear up, commanding Brian and a quiet Nana to focus entirely on keeping Emily safe from harm. Brian watches him leave, noting he has never seen Cyan make such a distressed face before, while an older warrior inspects the perimeter of their hidden cabin. The veteran admits he never imagined the simple housemaid would turn out to be a powerful draconic human, a sentiment that Brian completely shares. Emily cheerfully tells Brian to stop stressing over the past, offering him an apple as they both swear to do their absolute best to support their young master. Inside the imperial throne room, a furious Luenel demands an explanation from his father, who sharply orders the prince to watch his mouth. Luenel roars in frustration, slamming his fist down as he berates the emperor for being too soft to seize total reign over the continent. Luenel stands with an arrogant expression, entirely confident in his position. Aaron confrontingly points out that letting suspects go when they have clear evidence is completely unacceptable. Luenel is visibly surprised that she has managed to uncover his secret, but he quickly tries to save face, claiming her expression tells him everything he needs to know. He desperately tries to lie to his father, claiming he has absolutely no idea what is being talked about, but the emperor looks back down at him with pure intensity. Disgusted by his son's actions, the emperor furiously declares that Aaron is a far better fit for a ruler than Luenel will ever be, slamming the door and ordering him to get out of his sight. Luenel finds himself left in the shadows, his mind consumed with absolute rage toward Aaron Severus. He seethes to himself, cursing the princess for entirely ruining his master plan. The unexpected commotion echoes loudly through the grand hall, sending a violent shockwave through the room. A concerned guard stammers in confusion as Cyan Vert leaps forward out of the shadows into a flawless combat stance. The sudden clash sends bodies tumbling across the floor as a surge of raw energy is channeled straight into a strike. Cyan's eyes lock onto his target as the Emperor gazes down at the sudden chaos, demanding to know what Luenell has brought to his doorstep. Luenell lets out a breathless, unhinged laugh, declaring that he has finally arrived. With a deeply unsettling look on his face, the prince states that he has simply come to have a little chat with his precious sister as intense magical energy streaks through the air. The Emperor demands an explanation from Luenell for the utter madness occurring right before them. A devastating blast tears through the room as Luenell steps through the smoke with crimson eyes, coldly repeating that he has only come to talk. The prince raises his voice in a shouting frenzy, while the princess servant warns Luenell that even if he is the prince, his reckless actions cannot be tolerated. Determined to protect the princess, the subordinate resolves to take direct action, but Luenell merely looks back with intense, mocking eyes. Luenell mockingly calls him a parasite as a sudden slash cuts through the air, his eyes widening with an aggressive, challenging stare. Cyan commands them to stop, stepping between the royal siblings as Eren calmly looks ahead, demanding to know if the prince actually expected to hear something from her. Luenell is internally stunned, realizing Eren is completely different from the fragile sister he used to know, while she casually asks if she should just lay out the truth for him. Eren declares her name with absolute authority, leaving Cyan watching closely as the tension in the room reaches its absolute peak. The memory shifts back to the Emperor demanding to know if there is truly no connection to the incident, which Eren firmly denies, though her father notes the strange necklace she brought along. That artifact is a Days Stone from the Black Blood tribe, an illicit item used to master outlawed dark magic that unleashes a blinding burst of power upon activation. These dangerous stones are primarily used to control savage monsters, and recent intelligence reports reveal that someone within the palace has been secretly purchasing them. The primary contacts were the black market merchant Gilbert and a maid named Marilda, but both have mysteriously gone missing, or ended up dead. The Emperor presses further, pointing out that those two were heavily in touch with Luenell, asking Eren if the prince had secretly gifted her the necklace. Eren signals a firm refusal, stating directly that she has never received a single thing from her brother. Since the origin of the jewels inside the palace is now clear, Eren requests that Lunov be cleared of all suspicion and released immediately, especially since she saved countless lives at the banquet. The Emperor calmly agrees to drop the matter, while Eren privately worries that she can no longer predict what reckless move Luenell might make against the people closest to her. Cyan and Eren stand side by side with unwavering determination, completely resolved to stop the threat and ensure their companions are never harmed again. Back in the present, Luenell demands to know if this confrontation was truly what his sister wanted, hiding his face in the shadows as he questions her sudden shift in attitude. The prince speaks through the darkness, offended that she is treating him like a criminal, and wondering who could possibly be more important than him. Eren boldly steps forward with a guard at her side, stating that Cyan is incredibly important to her, as Cyan politely apologizes for the abrupt intrusion. Luenell is completely shaken, realizing he failed to detect Cyan's presence entirely, while a young onlooker gasps in absolute shock. Cyan coldly stands his ground, stating that he heard every single word of their conversation, prompting Luenell to demand exactly how long he has been hiding there. Cyan casually replies that he simply doesn't possess much of a presence, which infuriates the prince, who asks how Cyan dares to run his mouth so boldly. Cyan merely looks up with a sharp glare, asking if the prince intends to try and do something about him too, as a heavy aura fills the space. Luenell hesitates, knowing it would be a massive mistake to make an enemy out of Cyan Vert, while pondering if the rumors of Cyan's engagement to the princess are actually true. The prince recalls his true ambition to entirely eliminate Eren from the throne, because she constantly gets on his nerves. Luenell's eyes narrow with deep suspicion, realizing his sister is hiding something massive, which finally explains the unsettling warnings he received. An oppressive, terrifying feeling of intimidation radiates off Cyan, leaving the royal siblings feeling completely cornered by his sheer presence. Trying to break the suffocating tension, Luenell quickly claims he was only joking, though Cyan continues to stare him down with absolute gravity. Cyan reflects on the past life, remembering how Luenell was feared as the insane emperor who ruled over a mountain of skulls, noting that he is far more manageable in this timeline. A fierce look passes between them, as Luenell warns him to watch his back before turning around to storm out of the ornate room. The princess's servant breathes a sigh of relief, calling the prince a complete piece of trash and thanking Cyan, though Cyan insists that the princess did the vast majority of the work. Eren flusters in distress when Cyan suddenly sits right next to her, admitting that she is just a little bit surprised by his boldness. A companion laughs at the prince's stupidity, amazed that Cyan had the audacity to speak to royalty that way, while Cyan notes that their plan to make Luenell believe they are together worked perfectly. After bidding farewell to his allies, a furious voice screams out in the distance, demanding to know how their supposedly perfect plan failed so miserably. Luenell rages over the fact that the targets they wanted dead are all perfectly fine, realizing he has completely lost his father's royal trust. He falls to his knees in a desperate frenzy, shouting that he was meant to be the grand savior of the entire Ushif Empire. A dark figure steps forward, introducing himself as Boris Lelm and greeting the prince, prompting an angry Luenell to demand where he has been all this time. Luenell brings up the sudden disappearance of Emily, asking what success they could possibly have when they have clearly underestimated the people surrounding Princess Eren. A painful shout echoes through the room before Luenell coldly asks if he is expected to just sit around and reflect on his failures. Boris commands him to look closely, revealing a crystalline artifact glowing with an ominous, swirling purple magical energy. The Dark Operative explains that this item is extraordinarily rare, possessing a deeply evil and ominous nature. Luenell smirks with absolute malice as Boris reveals that this signature is the mana of a taboo demonic sword, proving that one of Eren's closest companions possesses a forbidden weapon. A massive, multi-limbed, monstrous serpent thrashes violently, letting out a deafening screech as it dominates the battlefield. A young man stares down at the bizarre dish, disappointed that it looks nothing like the crab stew he expected, while his companion wonders how the others are completely unfazed by the moving creature. He flinches back in absolute shock as the creature suddenly twitches right in front of him, swearing that the thing is definitely still alive. Cyan decides it is time to slip away before Ashel catches on to his movements, quietly telling his servant that he only stopped by to ensure everything was fine. He reassures them that he has placed stealthy guards all around the building before turning his back to make a swift exit. Cyan tells Brian to take care of himself, leaving his blonde companion bowing respectfully with a nervous expression as the heavy wooden door firmly shuts. A sinister voice chuckles from the corridor, mockingly commenting on what a lovely little family they have. A hooded figure corners Cyan in the dark hallway, demanding an immediate explanation for how he possessed secret knowledge regarding the Banquet of Blood and the tragic demise of his fiancée. The dark, furred, cloaked figure steps closer, noting that Cyan acts as if he can see the absolute future and warning him to choose his next words with extreme caution. The challenger glares directly at him, making it clear that depending on his answer, Cyan might be branded as a deadly enemy right then and there. The assailant, who is the hallmaster, Sarika, demands answers regarding the death of his fiancée, stating that Cyan could not have possibly known about their secret relationship. She demands to know the truth behind Cyan's foresight, openly suspecting that he might be a dangerous spy sent from a rival enemy organization. Cyan scoffs before dodging a sudden violent strike as his opponent lunges forward in a hooded jacket. Bright, magical energy erupts across the corridor as the attacker demands to know if Cyan truly intends to stand directly in her way. A lethal wave of crimson energy slashes through the air, but Cyan effortlessly maneuvers through the assault, telling his foe that she clearly never learns his lesson. Karam smirks through the intense clash, finding absolute enjoyment in the thrill of the battle as magical explosions shatter the surrounding structure. Energy beams collide violently with a resounding crash, forcing the dark-haired fighter to grunt in pain as he struggles against the overwhelming pressure. Sarika unleashes a rapid succession of strikes, confidently boasting that no matter how powerful a skill is, he can easily avoid it. A sudden, blinding burst of crimson energy erupts from the flank, completely catching the arrogant warrior off guard as he scrambles to dodge the lethal blast. Wiping the sweat from his brow, he realizes with horror that if he had tried to block Kairam's devastating power directly, he would have been obliterated on the spot, while his female companion curses her missed strike. The battlefield settles momentarily among the trees as a voice calls out, noting that stopping a monster of her caliber would require summoning the Demon King himself. Cyan smiles with absolute confidence, telling his opponent to brace himself because the warm-up is officially over, which only excites the purple-haired warrior further. Cyan instantly activates his demon sword control, unleashing a crushing blow that leaves Kairam on the floor. Cyan steps forward to reprimand the fallen Kairam, calling him an absolute idiot and warning that causing such a massive ruckus will get them all captured. The purple-haired assassin agrees to relocate their operations, ordering the remaining two to handle the immediate cleanup details on site. The heavy doors slam shut, leaving them both behind. Cyan walks in and gasps in disbelief upon realizing an intruder managed to entirely bypass their advanced detection barrier and protective mist. Demanding to know how she uncovered their location, Lunav stands confidently indoors, entirely unbothered by the chaos outside as she addresses the startled group of companions gathered around her. She offers a serene smile and expresses her sincere thanks, leaving the Cyan staring back in complete confusion over what he could have possibly done to earn her gratitude. Her words leave the companions demanding a clear explanation, completely unable to comprehend the meaning behind her cryptic message. A dark warrior looks down at a pale girl in a white dress who has lost consciousness, gently extending a hand radiating with bright, pulsing magical energy. Lunav boasts that he possesses the rare gift to freely manipulate and combine all elemental magic, allowing him to track anyone's specific mana signature with absolute precision. Lunav brags that this incredible gift was passed down from his grandfather, but Cyan steps forward with glowing blue energy, coldly countering that the power behaves much more like a curse that broke Lunav's body. Lunav quietly clasps her hands together, suggesting they move to a much safer location, while Cyan commands the whispering companions to pack up their things immediately. When asked where they are heading, Cyan firmly states their destination is Luan Academy, bringing a joyful smile to a companion who realizes she can now take care of him every single day. Deep within a dark chamber, a kneeling figure addresses Master Eliana just as a violent magical explosion rocks the area. A stern, bearded man watches over them as Cyan stands upon a wooden bridge, questioning his companion about why she chose to anonymously save them if she claims to have no duty to fulfill. Cyan watches Lunav examine her hands, which glow with a volatile dark element that she initially mistook for standard darkness. She explains that she secretly gathered a sample of his mana back at the restaurant, leaving Cyan realizing that her hidden ability allows her to read personal mana data through simple physical contact. Cyan reflects on the day she passed out from the volatile mana strain, directly asking her if she plans to deliver that harvested energy directly to Riggins. The youth scoffs at the idea, stating it would be far too much of a pain, prompting Cyan to ask if she is actively planning a rebellion against her own grandfather. The companions stand together on the wooden floorboards, sharing a silent, knowing look as Cyan places a supportive hand on her shoulder. Lunav's internal body chemistry is described as an intensely boiling pot, but someone has forcibly slammed a heavy lid down on top of it to suppress the volatile reaction. Cyan looks down with an intense stare, explaining that he simply poked a necessary hole in that restrictive lid because the poor child looked exactly like someone else's helpless marionette. He tells her there is absolutely no need to thank him, but warns her that pushing her limits again will be highly dangerous before she quietly bids him farewell with a soft gasp. Cyan firmly points downward, declaring that he is undeniably a genuinely good person, just as a sudden shout of disbelief echoes straight from the president's office of the Garam Association. A panicked official stammers that all charges have thankfully been dropped and suggests sending a formal petition, but a furious, white-bearded elder violently cuts him off with a loud refusal. Enraged upon learning that Lunav is stopping elsewhere, the elder unleashes a torrent of glowing blue energy, screaming for his subordinates to track her down and drag her back immediately. A squad of elite riders gallops across the countryside on horseback, while Cyan looks over at his cheerful companions asking if there is truly that happy about their journey. The maid questions how she will accompany them, since servants are strictly forbidden inside the academy, but her companion reassures her that the principal will surely make a special exception. Inside the office, the massive bearded principal booms a flat refusal, though a persistent Cyan steps forward, begging for permission and promising to keep her entirely out of sight. Cyan steps up with a serious look, promising that he will absolutely never skip a single one of his lessons if the request is granted, forcing the principal to let out a heavy sigh. The principal stares back with gravity, demanding to know if this unusual request is directly related to the infamous Banquet of Blood. The principal notes, he knows, Cyan wouldn't ask for permission without a deeply serious reason, prompting Cyan to admit that explaining the full situation is incredibly difficult right now. Cyan looks the elders straight in the eye, firmly stating that he was not the mastermind behind the horrific banquet of blood, leaving his companion staring back with a sharp glance. Cyan mutters that he completely fails to understand why they would ever assume such a thing. With the negotiations successfully completed, the magnificent classical buildings of the academy stand tall and peaceful under a clear blue sky. Cyan walks the grounds with his allies, explaining his firm theory that Ashel was the absolute mastermind who planned the entire conspiracy from the shadows, while Boris merely carried out the physical labor. The three companions stand close together, knowing that this underhanded method is exactly how those dangerous enemies have always operated. Cyan discovers a massive, muscular warrior in the middle of an intense training routine, loudly counting out his thousands of repetitions over a fallen training partner. The blonde brute spots him and beams with excitement, calling Cyan his buddy and instantly challenging him to a fierce duel to determine who is truly the strongest. He proudly flexes his muscles mid-sentence, but before he can even finish his boast, a sudden blow floors him instantly. The muscular challenger crashes face first onto the tiled floor, completely incapacitated, while Cyan calmly stands over him, entirely unfazed by the sudden interruption. Cyan stares down at the groaning warrior, dryly questioning if he managed to kill him, before turning to Emily to ask what on earth is wrong with the brute. Emily looks back with a worried frown, admitting she has absolutely no idea, while a small companion complains loudly about how incredibly harsh Cyan can be. Cyan's attention shifts to a mysterious letter in his hands, his eyes widening in complete surprise as he realizes the message has been sent directly from Lunav. The letter contains a shocking confession from the young mage, boldly stating that she has officially run away from her family home. Meanwhile, a sinister hooded figure addresses an instructor, coldly reminding them that this extreme path is the absolute only way to completely halt Ridgen's Rainreaver. Instructor Nella stands firmly in her golden armor, declaring with absolute conviction that she is not foolish enough to ever feel an ounce of pity for that monster. The dark-cloaked mastermind praises her resolve, wishing ultimate glory to the Garum Kingdom as they plot their next move from the shadows. Back at the academy, Lunav comments on Cyan's aggressive nature, while Cyan points out that there should have been a powerful barrier spell locking down the dormitory doors. She casually explains that she simply analyzed the barrier's unique mana composition and deployed a counterspell to entirely cancel it, smugly asking if that isn't incredibly cool. Cyan is completely stunned by her overwhelming capability, realizing her power goes far beyond a simple scan if she can dismantle complex defensive spells instantly. He notes that she arrived precisely when he was about to act, but she explains she simply couldn't bear to wait around any longer for his formal response. Lunav rests her chin on her hand thoughtfully, while Cyan directly asks if her grandfather was the one who initially ordered her to establish contact with him. Lunav holds the teacup tightly, admitting that was the initial reason, but firmly stating it is no longer the case, leaving Cyan to decide whether he can truly trust her word. Thank you for watching Buff Goblin. Want more recaps and audiobooks? Check out the description for more. This series is a fun read. It is called The Regressed Son of a Duke is an Assassin. We end on chapter 42 in this video.